For me, it's because I was obviously been in the job, and the temptation, and well, not just that, but that's what brought it into high resolution, because you see yourself as the good guy, everyone else says you're the good guy, you're given a shirt, you make a promise to God, all these other things happen, and then you're put in positions, and relatively quickly too, where you think to yourself, well, if I break this rule or cut this corner, or act in this way that might not even be unlawful, just might be unpalatable, I'm saying it's for the greater good. Therefore, it's justifiable. Therefore, I'm still a good person, despite the fact that I've done something that's reprehensible. And and you really do, like, you need that. It's one of the reasons that I came back to Christianity. It's not the only reason, but it's like it's one of the reasons, because it's like, dude, you need a moral compass, and people, because I know one of the things you're really keen to do is chat about society in generally, and that's I think that's so pertinent, and we need to, because we're losing that moral compass, and there's a reason that people are going right off the edge into this weird woke. It's because they just don't have a moral compass, and people think that they can do it themselves, and then when you mix it with reason, and you tell yourself that I'm a rational person and I'm acting, this is evidence based. Well, what happens really quickly, in my experience, both with myself but watching other people, including coppers, is that you rationalize. You don't reason, you rationalize, and those two things are not the same.
Yeah, and it's kind of been really like that. Your statement of you hope you do believe the things that you say you do has kind of played over and over and over and over and over in my brain, and it's cropped up in all sorts of different situations. And it's kind of interesting, because even like the societal stuff is kind of more a reflection of like a group. Like it's really a reflection of every individual giving themselves a pass to just go off and be a shit in the moment, because this person really annoyed me and they're really wrong, and I've given myself the moral authority to go off and tell them what's what. It kind of is. It's been interesting, because more and more it's kind of occurring to me that it's a difficult thing, because things are going completely off the rail. Like, there's no question about that, but it really does come down to the individual of how are you choosing to behave in this moment. Are you doing this humbly, or is your ego rampantly out of control? Because there is a lot that we don't know about everything. So people think that they're right. They kind of feel it in their bones, but they don't seem to be leaving a lot of room for, maybe there's some element that they're not seeing. Maybe they, maybe just be a little bit less sure that you're absolutely empowered to charge off into this situation and, lay the law down in an absolute way. It's been.
You're right, and it manifests itself in the dehumanization of the other. So the first thing you got to do is convince yourself that you're right, and really that's self-crowning. If you think of what's happening there, Cav, that's rather than looking at some sort of external arbiter of moral goodness, you're crowning yourself. You're saying, well, if I'm good, therefore, if what I say and what I do is good, therefore what I oppose is bad. Therefore, the other people that I'm treating badly and I'm stomping all over deserve it. And in fact, more than that, me doing that is yet another example of my goodness, because I'm stunning and brave. Like,
it's this weird circle, but like it's a difficult thing, because it's like, where is that line? Like, what's going on? Lefty way. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold, so I'm a bit.
That's okay, bro.
But it's kind of this thing where it's like the lefty wokey stuff is so completely out of control. There's no question about it. But That line of you are justified, you have to stand up for, that's what it is. Like people need to stand up for what they think is right, like group virtue, like putting things back on, like getting things back on track. And to do that, you kind of have to go into the other camp and debate the issue. And there is going to be a natural conflict there. And you are going to have to tell people that they're wrong and that you disagree with them. And you know what I mean? Like, they are heated moments, they are difficult conversations, but like, it's so easy to other people and demonize people. So it's kind of like this delicate balance of where is that line? Like, how far is too far?
Well, there's a lot in that. And one of the other mistakes is people don't realize that the line isn't between you and another person, or even you and another idea, or you and an ideology. It's that line goes right down the center of your heart. And I see this as a return to paganism, Kev, because like this tribal paganism, it's like, my tribe is good, whatever it does, because it's my tribe. And the other tribe is bad, whatever it does, because you know, that's them. And if you think that's all these different gods fighting each other. So rather than having this monotheistic understanding that no, it's you, it's within you. Yep. You've got that capacity that's in you. It's not over there.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
so
it's kind of been, the last couple of months have been really about, it's really about how I conduct myself. Like, it's not really about how everybody else is behaving, what everybody else is doing, what the trials are doing, or what the turfs are doing, or this person or that. No, it's really about standing up for what's right and knowing where that line is, and not crossing that line, no matter how much I want to. And I don't, you don't always succeed at that, like nobody does, but kind of it kind of is striking me more and more that really is what this whole culture war kind of comes down to. And it can be frustrating, because you see people that are some of the best people that you'll ever meet, like some of the most amazing, great-hearted people that have kind of personalized the issues and like revved themselves up so understandably, like so understandably, that they like you kind of can't, they seem to get themselves into a position where that they really aren't able to tolerate like a differing opinion more. Like, even if it's just like a little, like a small variation of what they, you agree with them 95%, but on the 5% that you disagree with them about, and you don't even necessarily oppose them, you just disagree, you see a slightly different path through that bit, that's enough. Like, you're the enemy. That's it.
Yeah, and that's it too. And it's like, no, I'm not going to give you a platform. No, I'm not going to associate with you. No, I'm not going to. Again, but it's this idea that, you are the one that monopolizes. It's your moral antennae. You vibrate at this really high frequency. I know there's not a God, but if there was a God, my moral antennae would be vibrating at that level. It's just the nauseating self-regard that comes with that too. It's the sin of pride. Look, when it comes right down to it, it's the sin of pride. And that's why you see this, self-righteousness is related to pride, and you're related to this, oh God. And that's why they come across as so nauseating, these people. And when you link your identity, because again, like if you've linked your identity, it's so pagan. So if you've linked your identity to so you've linked yourself to your identity. It's like, well, I'm an Aboriginal person, or I'm a trans person, or I'm a gay person, or I'm a, whatever it is, these multitudes of identities that have come out. Well, if
there's a new one every minute.
But so you link and define yourself by that, rather than integrating, because that's really fractal. So rather than integrating these things, and again, that's what monotheism does. It integrates all of these different identities into one thing. So you're not supposed to be this fractured pagan living all these weird identities that are going to fight with each other in your head. That's going to happen. You know what I mean? And like I said, you're going off on a kind of like tangent, I suppose. One of the funny things about that is like demanding that people, I would never, I used to, but I would never now expect anyone to agree with me, because I don't even agree with myself all the time. And I don't even mean over a period of time. It's like, well, I don't agree with Matthew Maloney 2 weeks ago, or Matthew Maloney in 2005, or Matthew Maloney in 1995.
Like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, like mate, I don't even agree with Matthew Maloney right now. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm still in the process of integration. Like
Yeah.
it's you think of all the presuppositions that are behind people that do that, Kev. Like it's genuinely, how can it? Are you so sure of yourself? Are you so sure of your moral supremacy? Are you so sure that you can perceive a really complex situation, or see a person, and there's nothing more complex than a person, and understand everything about that person? Like, really, you're that sure? And I saw it all the time in the bureaucracy. I'm not going to mention a name, but like we had this really high ranked executive, and the nauseating self-regard that you would see that person, because they just come in and go, well, we know that it's like this, and this is what's going to happen, and this is the way it is. But this person got up in front of a group of Indigenous people and started reading out, like, this is what we know about Indigenous people. And I was flabbergasted. I was sitting there, like, I was cringing. And, got to and some of it was just stats. So some of it was kind of like, okay, well, generally speaking, this is the guy, some of the lifespan stuff. But then it came to religion, and said, well, Indigenous people are spiritual, are more spiritual than non-Indigenous people. And if that person meant, and like quite clearly, without going in the rest of the qualification, the rest of the comments this person made, that person didn't just mean they have more of a religious sense, which is true, but look, they're a Christian people, especially in the Torres Straits, excluding if the breakup actually, and if you look at Indigenous people in remote and rural areas who are closer to their cultural roots, they're a Christian people. The Torres Strait Islanders, especially. Up in Cape York, it's not as true as the Straits, but it's generally too. And the more you get in the urban centers, the more you get, well, white urban godlessness. It's just, but it's kind of still spiritual. So they won't say, no, I go to church. I totally reject the white imposed evil colonial religion. I, believe in whatever it is, the rainbow serpent, or they'll say Indigenous spirituality. And then this guy went on to say, it's like, well, that's how we're going to treat and categorize people, because that's the truth. And I'm just like, mate, if I was Indigenous and Christian, and most of the people that were in the room were Indigenous and Christian, I would have started throwing things at this guy. The absolute presumption and the nauseating self-regard that this person presumed to get up and just go, well, that's the category you fit into. So that's the height of racism. And it happened at Datsit. What
the? Yeah. I kind of think that people, I think that people think that the world is much more solid and understood than it really is. Like watching Jordan Peterson, which I haven't done for a while, but I watched that. I've watched the Exodus, the first episode of the Exodus thing.
So good.
And then the one with the Telegraph guy. Like we don't, like he's talking about, we don't know why we dream, we don't know this, we don't know that, like we don't know why we have a conscious, or what our conscious is meant to do, or blah blah blah. Just
what it is,
all the like running through all of the things that like psychiatry, psychologically, that we just don't know. Like it kind of is, it's kind of humbling, and it makes me wonder a lot about historical stuff as well. Like, there were no public toilets is kind of the subject that comes up regularly in my life. Pre, Emily Pankhurst and rada, and it's like, well, maybe for the aristocracy, absolutely, but what about the Matchstick Girls and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Radium Girls
Yeah.
and the washerwomen and the people that used to sell roses on the street?
Yep.
Like, like maybe we don't know as much maybe our understanding of history per se isn't quite as rock solid as we actually think it is. Like,
Exactly. Look, Mary Harrington talks exactly about this in this excellent conversation that she has. And she's like, she's come to the conclusion that feminism really, as we know it, is actually happened. Well, first a lot of the things that were liberating, because the name of the talk was, feminism hasn't liberated women. It's fundamentally her thesis, and there was a lot of nuances to that. But she also, the point that she made was like, were the rules around property rules around women pre-industrial revolution, was it all the man? Yes. The answer to that question is yes. But her hypothesis, and she says that, she believes it's backed by the evidence, and I found her argument compelling, is that, well, it was because it was a pre-industrial society. There wasn't we didn't have industries as we know them today. Like, you didn't work for someone else. Like, the basic economic unit was the family. So in Clan Maloney might be brewers or cobblers or bakers or whatever it is, you know what I mean? And when you got married and you had kids together as a husband and wife, that's how you would make your money. That was the economic unit that we had. And considering the soft power that women had, and that they were doing other things besides just looking after the kids and being wives, which of course is the most important job there is. And I say this all the time. My wife says she doesn't actually remember saying this, but it's true. She did say, we don't have families so there's an economy. We have an economy so there can be families.
Yeah.
And that's the way that things were structured, around that simple understanding. Well, then you got the Industrial Revolution, which of course changed things completely. It turned that upside down. All of a sudden, the guys were going out and they were doing, these things, and the women were left at home. Like, yes, true. Yeah. And if they were with an abusive, repulsive husband, they were caught. Yet there was this capacity where they might have been able to leave and start off something else, and without. So, yes, feminism had that point at that time, but it was because of the Industrial Revolution. Like, that kind of what really kicked it off was a complete restructuring of the way that we did things, and it was technology, the way that we did things economically.
Yeah,
and rather than of course the birth control pill, which is a technological thing too, incidentally, and a flow on arguably from the Industrial Revolution. So I found that really compelling. It's a class thing. It's not like and
I kind of find Mary Harrington, like, I love her. I love her ideas, and the whole agricultural versus industrial revolution. Like, I kind of vaguely knew that in the back of my mind, but I hadn't really articulated any of that. Like, stuff, but you can't, like, you don't really think about it, blah, blah, blah. But she still does this whole thing about splitting society into men and women. Like, they're like that women's problems are still largely men's fault. That I really don't like. She still has that, which is kind of the problem that I have overall with feminism, which means so many different things.
Can you define that? I mean, I know it's hard for you. Can you? What do you mean by feminism when you say it? So that not just I understand, but the listeners who are going.
So there
and what outcomes? What would a good feminist society look like?
There is this weird conflation that everybody, including myself, has done, where we think that if you are someone who believes that female-bodied people are capable of navigating the modern world on their own steam equally as much as men, then that is a feminist belief. And it kind of is a belief in equality is kind of a feminist belief, and most people would subscribe to that. Like the largest percentage of people who say that they are feminist think, yeah, men and women are equally capable of doing any range of things, and if you are, regardless of whatever dangles or whatever your chromosomes are, if you are capable of doing a task or fulfilling a job, then there shouldn't be any barriers to you doing that.
Amen to that.
When most people say feminism, that's what they mean. And that kind of is feminism. But at the same time, there's then academic feminism, which is the theoretical kind, which is where all of the patriarchal theories come from and lots of the research gets done. And that is indescribable. Like there are so many different types, and there's liberal feminism and radical feminism, and then there's a whole heap of radical feminists who think that radical feminism is basically just being extra strong in your feminist beliefs, so that they don't understand that radical feminism is a different arm, and you can't just be extra feminist and be a radical feminist. Like I think that it has splintered into, it's kind of just an umbrella thing. I kind of think at this point, there is no single definition that works across the board, because you're going to bump into, like I've bumped into people who are, especially in this debate, the trans debate on Twitter, who are kind of socially credentialed radical feminists or feminists. So people that say they have feminist beliefs and they use feminist theory as a tool to theorize about society and the nature of society. And I don't know how prestigious their accreditation is, or whether whether they would be regarded as a radical feminist or an academic feminist, or like an influential person within the academic body of radical feminism or feminism in general. But they have gathered a following around them of people. So when I say they are socially credentialed, I mean there are people around them, like anywhere up to 10, 20, 30, 40,000 followers on social media, who regard them as an authority, who believe what they say. But there doesn't really have to be any accreditation behind that. They can just be saying things that people want to hear. So so I've had conversations where I'll say something like, feminism is about the empowerment of women, and get slapped down by someone who is socially credentialed and say, no, that's not what feminism is. It's a set of theories to view blah 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 blah. And then you go into another place and you use the theory, like the definition that you just got slapped down with, and someone else will slap you down and go, no, how can you be so stupid? Like that's not what it is at all. So it's kind of like it's
Judean People's Front.
Like it's just,
we're not the Judean People's Front, it's the People's Front of Judea. Get it right. Like
like, so it kind of is, it depends on who you're talking to and how much they know. And like a large number of people who say they are feminists have, like, they just believe in basic equality. They've done no actual reading of theories or books, or they don't follow it. They just think, oh yeah, women and men are basically as capable of each other, plus or minus, and what's your problem? Like,
yeah, look, and I'm kind of in that camp. Like it doesn't matter. Like, I mean, if you're a woman and you want to be a CEO and you want to make all the because it's always spoken about, of course, Jordan Peterson makes this point and everyone else. It's never like, we need more plumbers, we need more women in jail, we need more women sewage workers.
Yeah.
Come on, girls, get out there, dig those ditches and shovel that shit. Like, no, you kind of don't hear that argument. But like accepting the paradigm that they're talking about things, it's like, so if you want to be a CEO or you want to be an elected representative and you want to get into politics, like there's serious sacrifices that need to happen for that. And if you're willing to make those sacrifices, which means essentially kind of giving up your family, really, or at least like getting some really good nannies. I mean, power
You're
to
still
you.
giving up your family because you're not watching your kids grow up. Other people are raising your kids.
Exactly. And what's more important? Again, like that, that's a decision for people to make. I just don't buy the equity argument. Like, I believe in equality of opportunity, absolutely, without qualification.
Yeah.
But I don't believe in equity. It's like the cards are not going to fall that way. And you see this not just in, you see it in racial groups too. And I'm convinced, like now having worked in that space a fair bit, a lot of it's cultural. It's like you get some cultures that just don't value whatever it is activity it is. They don't value mathematics as much, or they value the spoken word. They don't value this as much. So they concentrate on this. Yeah. And I would hope, because I'll stay away from Indigenous issues because like, I don't want to say anything that could get me sacked. I'll use an American example. Like African Americans are a more robust people, generally speaking. Like you're going to get, big, strong white guys. But generally speaking, they're more robust. So that means their bones are bigger, you get more muscle density, you get all these other kind of stuff. They're going to be better at sports, land-based sports than white people. So that's why you get a lot of African Americans in football, in NFL, and in basketball, but you don't get as many in baseball. Now, the reason you don't get as many in baseball is not because they're not good at it. And, we understand how much of money grabbing, blood sucking corporations, all those different sporting clubs are. Like, they kill people to get better players. It's not like, you're not going to swing a bat because the color is, they don't care about that. The reason it is because culturally speaking, African Americans are more interested in playing basketball. That's their sport. That culturally, that's the sport that they associate with, they kind of like look at. In the same way that West Indians like cricket and, Indian Indians like cricket.
They're obsessed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cultural thing. And this weird idea, these people that are supposed to be hyper-rational and ensure us that they're evidence-based, completely and utterly ignore any other thing that could possibly contribute to an inequitable, in inverted commas, outcome, a different outcome. Well, it's got to be racism. Well, it's got to be sexism. Well, it's got to be.
It must be.
And it makes it, and believe me, like, when you're working in the public service and people are going, and, they're looking at some outcome because, one of the many reasons that I've been in the jobs that I have been is to like bridge those gaps. Like, I'm kind of serious about it. I've given big swathes of my life to make it happen. But like, when you're sitting there in meetings and people go, well, it's just institutional racism. You go, no, it's not. Well, firstly, you might as well walk into Salt Lake City, Utah and go, well, this whole Joseph Smith thing, I don't know, maybe he was talking through his hat. Well, seriously, that's the degree of blasphemy that we're talking about here. It really is. It's religious. It's blasphemy to them. Yeah. But it says to me that when it comes right down to it, they're not really serious about solving the problem.
Well, they're not really as evidence-based as they think. Because if you're evidence-based, then you would go with whatever solution, you would go with wherever the evidence points. But that's not what happens.
Well, it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, though. Like, are you the person that you think you are, and saying, are you that person? But if you were really serious about, like, if you said to yourself, okay, well, I'm serious about, I don't know, Indigenous disadvantage. I want to do my competent best in as much as I can to contribute to resolving that problem. So you break it up into different, well, what does it mean? Well, cultural participation, economic participation, less incarceration. So, first you'd look down your metrics and you say, well, I'm going to look at this. So then you'd look at it and go, well, how can I fix this problem? What's causing this inequitable outcome? Let's look at it. And if you're not actually willing to look at other stuff, I'm really getting to the stage now where I just don't think, I'll come out and say this, and it's just going to stay in. I don't think a lot of the people that are involved in these industries, and that's what they are serious about resolving the problem. I seriously don't. I just don't think that they care that much. I think that they're really comfortable in participating in a narrative. It's like, yes, I care about this thing and I'm going to do about it. It's evil racism. Shut up, evil racist. Yeah, look at me. Oh, $10,000 a week, thanks. I'll have that. Thank you. Plus the status that goes with it, plus. A comfortable job that you can't be sacked from. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I don't believe them. I just don't.
I don't know if they like this is something that I wanted to talk to you about though. Like self-reflection, like we're able to see other people's foibles very, very easily. Like depending, like not always, like you have to be a discerning and intuitive person to be able to meet someone and be able to start gauging, you know, the more information you get, the better you can gauge them.
My kids are past masters at pointing out my shortcomings, Kev. Let me tell you.
Yeah, but
It's
I mean,
so
if we aren't really able to, like, we don't know what we don't know, like, so you can't.
Yeah.
I've kind of sat down a lot in the last couple of months and been like, what are the things that I really don't want to know about myself? Like, what is it that I don't want to know? And it's actually kind of difficult. Like,
Oh, yeah.
like it's not easy at all. And you kind of have to keep continuously searching, like, what are my worst character flaws? What are my worst faults? Because your brain just wants to shut off. Like, to start with, your brain does not want to go there at all. You know, suddenly you're distracted with, you know, paint peeling bloody videos on YouTube for 6 hours. Like, you will distract yourself in every way you possibly can. And like I kind of like I move in similar circles to what you are describing. Well, I have historically moved like queer, lesbian, gay, lefty, greeny. Like my ex-wife was a photovoltaic solar panel type wind turbine engineer that is very high up in the New Zealand government on the environmental front. So these are my people that we're talking like woke are the people that I come from. And I have agreed largely with them for till very recently. I don't they really don't know what they don't know. Like I think they
You've got to be
actually
willing to take
seriously
that.
believe, you know, like one of my best friends worked at the UN level. He's a lawyer and
Wow.
he's a trans guy, so he's worked on a lot of this stuff for the last decade. Like not an evil
No.
blah 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 blah. He just believes in globalism. He believes that national borders should be broken down. And I'm really sorry to the people in, you know, North Queensland who work in the mining industry that are gonna have to take it up the arse. I'm really sorry about that, but I won't think about it for too long. Like they really do think that they are good people and that this will benefit the world as a plus, and they just don't really seem to think like, and I know I didn't do this really either. I just didn't think about the bits that I didn't want to think about. Like,
Well, I mean, it's the same with a corrupt cop. Again, you know, the sort of thing I was saying before. It's like, yeah, look, you know, I'm kind of like I'm doing this for the best. Look, everybody thinks, and it's an idea from I'm pretty sure it's Aquinas. It could be Augustine. No, I'm pretty sure it's Aquinas. That this idea that everybody, regardless of how evil someone is, they think that they see themselves as acting for the good. And quite clearly, you know, I know I hate talking about, you know, Hitler, but like Hitler clearly saw himself as acting for the good.
yeah,
He really did. Like, and there was an internal logic, and I disagree with it completely, but there's a certain degree of internal logic to National Socialism, and indeed there's a certain degree of internal logic to socialism and international socialism and Marxism. Like it's wrong, but those people that are doing that and that piled, because you know we know the top 4 murderers. You know, Hitler was only the 4th.
mm,
You know, so it went Mao Zedong is probably the greatest mass murderer of all time, closely followed by Stalin. There's a bit of an argument: was it Stalin? Was it Mao? You know, who
when you're
knows?
into that many millions, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Well, you know, see, I mean, that's the thing. You know, one death is a tragedy. A million deaths is a statistic. Then Lenin, and then Hitler. So he's only fourth.
But he's the one we focus on the
And
most.
he's the one that we focus on.
Mm.
Like, and why? Because people want to be blind, exactly what you're saying. So you got all these neo-Marxists, and that's tied up with the globalism, because the Marxism was a globalist kind of thing.
Yeah.
They want to, but it's like, no, or well, you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. 60 million or so. Meh. This is for the greater good. But that's why I'm kind of it's not that I was having this discussion the other day with a really hyper smart political person who's really involved in conservative politics, who I was quite flattered, was kind of like, Matt, you got to get involved, yada yada yada. And look, I am involved in some ways, but it's like I said, look, you have to understand, I'm actually not anymore. And this was not true like 10 years ago. I'm not an inherently political person anymore. And they're like, what? You care about these greater things. I said, yeah, look, these are just manifestations of what's going on. I now see this entire argument. It's religious.
Yeah.
But this is the woke cult is a religion. Environmentalism is neo-paganism. Like, they even use the language Gaia. Like, they're not even fighting it anymore. Like, it's like they're tree worshipping neo-pagans. So this is at its heart, this is a religious argument.
Yeah.
This is, we see it as political, but that's not what's happening here. These are religious patterns playing out.
No, the political stuff is the follow-on effect of
it's downstream.
The lack of a Christian belief. And I don't even like it, watching this stuff. Like, I don't believe in God. I don't know that I will ever actually believe in God, but I had this interesting experience probably a decade ago now, where I was kind of starting to get into the Buddhism thing, kind of a bit more past the podcast and reading the occasional book kind of thing. And I was kind of trying to decide Tibetan Buddhism or Theravada Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what it's called. Anyway, and the Tibetan Buddhism, they do a lot of prostration, where basically they will bow down, say a prayer, scoot along the floor. Actually, no, get up, take a step forward. And they'll basically prostrate themselves, like all the way to the far end of the room, like as embarrassing as it could possibly be.
Yeah.
And they don't believe in God.
No.
So they're bowing to the Buddha, and I'm like, what the fuck is this about? Like, this is, why would you do this? This is,
ritual,
embarrassing. Like, what? No. Like, I'm there. And it took me a couple of days to realize it's about submitting your ego.
Mm-hmm.
Like, making something other than yourself the most important thing in you. Like, you have to subdue your ego, and the only way to do that is external. So I kind of am coming to the point where, like, Dennis Prager talks about this a little bit, like, the greatest argument for the existence of God is what happens without the existence of God. So I'm not really sure I actually do or will subscribe to actually a Christian God, existing. But the devices, Jordan Peterson has been really good at breaking down the devices of these stories are ancient wisdom, they are moral stories, there are many, many codes through them. They play it, like they pop up over and over and over and over and over again everywhere, and they serve a really, really, really important social purpose. Like, this is some of the most important shit there is. So I kind of agree with you in that it is a religious war, and the politics are basically just a knock-on effect of what happens. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. But
probably from
a quick throwaway comment, and I hope this one doesn't stick in your head too much. But I mean, you're a transformer.
It doesn't really matter. Huh?
You're a transitional figure in many senses of the word. Like, obviously, for the the FTM thing, but like, you're reassessing. You're very indicative. I don't know whether or not you realize this. You're very indicative of what's going on in society. Like you're an intelligent person, you've got a questioning mind, and you're reassessing some of these things that you'd kind of discarded, and you're kind of unsure. It's like, well, I don't know if it's worth going all the way back, but like you're seriously reassessing these things. And again, you're going from left to right. You're going from atheist to crawling through what seems to be some sort of hazy agnosticism. And I'll tell you where that's going to end up. Like if you let it, yeah, you're going to end up believing in some sort of.
Because at some point it really doesn't matter. Like if you value the tradition, then the rest is really irrelevant.
Like in what sense?
If you value the tradition of the Christian religion, then and participate in it willingly and understand that subduing your ego by taking the steps is an important cultural and personal experience to orient your life, then you're going to end up believing in God. At some point. It's inevitable.
Yes.
And whether he exists or not is completely irrelevant.
Yeah, because he didn't care. No. Like, you know what I mean? Like he's not, oh, accept, so, do you accept gravity? Whatever. Like he's kind of different to that. But something else.
Yeah.
Sorry. We're so, I really enjoy our conversations, and I get so excited, and I don't mean to talk over you. But
no, you're fine.
You're talking about the importance of ritual too before, and how that's linked, and how ritual and all these things are pointing towards something. It's like, hey, get out of yourself, and they're pointing up. One of the other, obviously, being a Catholic is like we go to confession, and I don't know if you've heard about it or what it is. Is well, mate, it's tough. It's tough, and that's the good thing. So rather than having this self-reflection, well, it's only just self-reflection. So you sit in front of another person who's a religious authority and say, well, this is what I've done. And they're the ones that help you with, well, this is what's probably going on in your head. This is the manifestations. Like, so you're trying to know yourself. Okay, you've done these things. They may or may not be indicative of your authentic self. Let's work through that. And what does authentic mean? So, like, you've got this pull between what the Buddhists, I believe, call the animal self, we Christians call the body, and this idea that you're made in the image of God. So the spirit of God is within you. So you've got the logos, and your job is to, at all times, is to confront, as Jordan Peterson says, is to confront the infinite. You're a finite being, you're confronting the infinite, and through the logos, through love, through love and truth, you have to change infinite potential into livable finite reality. And you do that in a conversation, like Jordan Peterson points out. This conversation, we're doing that right now. This conversation could have gone literally anywhere. It was literally for all practical purposes. But it's when you need these guides and these structures to work through it. All these. There's a reason we had all these rituals. There's a reason they were there. And for me, and unfortunately, although I haven't been to confession for a couple of months, when I do go, and even when I'm going regularly, I find, I'm there for a while. Like it's kind of, well, forgive me, Father, for I had sinned. Blah 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 blah. And of course, they do the head thing, But like again, they help you look at yourself. They help you know thyself. They help you do that. It's just such a beautiful thing, and you don't get distracted by the paint peeling.
Maybe for a week or so before you go.
Yeah.
I kind of think it's I kind of think that it kind of flows from. John Peterson was talking about in that video. He was talking about in the Telegraph video. He's talking about that any power, any organization based around power, so government, etc., is always going to tilt towards tyranny at some point, which is why there need to be checks and balances.
Absolutely.
And it kind of has broken down over time, but we also have taken absolutely the whole thing for granted for better part of a century at this point. Like I wasn't ever really taught about the principles of why our government, you get taught the government is set up as divided into two houses, upper and lower, and blah 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 blah, and the Governor General and this, that, and the other. But they don't ever really explain why. They just tell you this is what is. And it's been interesting coming across, and I haven't done a major study of this as yet. Like bumping into Edmund Burke.
Yeah.
About, he's kind of the first conservative person that started to articulate the ideas. Like when you start getting back to that level, you kind of, and you play it forward and you start looking around at, what's actually happening. You start realizing actually that the only way to set up a society where people are free seems to be that way, not this way. Like the whole,
exactly. There's a reason we have these institutions. There's a reason these things happen, and it's so like it's just funny that people believe, and again, like at a really high level, like really high educated people believe that we can just throw all this stuff out and rely on good intentions. Thomas Sowell says that we're replacing what works for what sounds good.
Yeah,
with what sounds good.
Yeah,
and no, you're right. And what brought me, like, I've only read, I haven't read Burke's original treatise, and I haven't read Leviathan. I haven't read, I've only read papers. I've only read papers on them. But what helped me was watching what happened during the English Civil Wars, which is what set up the Parliament as we know it, and getting that historical context. It's like, oh, so this was happening, so they set up this institution to stop that, and all this blood was being shed, and so they agreed on this to sort that out. Like, and you pull those things away, and these things are going to, especially when you take out Christianity, when you get this idea, it's like, no, all human beings are sacred. Their lives are sacred. Adolf Hitler's life was sacred. Mao's life is sacred. Every human being, and everybody, doesn't matter what you've been accused of. You could be being accused of genocide. You deserve due process. You deserve a good, robust defense. Someone with a good legal mind needs to come in and state your case towards a court where there are rules, where, and all of those things matter.
Yeah.
You throw that out, and you're going to get this mob cancel culture. I mean, you've been subject to it, apparently. Like, people have like, oh, okay, you're a traitor to, this.
Oh, I get, yeah.
Mate, what's happened? Do you mind telling us?
I kind of am shadow banned. I think a little bit algorithmically, but also because I'm like in the debate that I'm in, because I'm a trans guy and not a trans woman, I'm seen as less of a threat, which is kind of true and not true. So I get skated over, so I'm not as important, so I get overlooked that way. And then because I'm also not willing to go along with the feminist stuff per se, like there's very much a like, you will agree with women, like, kind of thing that happens, where it's like, if you're going to be a good trans person, then, and I mean, there is a growing extremist, because people are really angry, and understandably so, kind of pocket of people where it's like, we're just not going to deal with those people. There's no such thing as a good trans person. They're all traitors. They're all liars. They all think this. They all think that they changed sex, like, sort of stuff. Which, like, I can kind of, in their echo chamber that they exist in, of course, it makes total sense. But when you step outside that echo chamber and actually talk to people, you find out that's not the case. So that they're kind of, I have kind of gotten away. So yeah, so I kind of am a little bit shadow banned in that there are a large swathe of people that just won't talk to me at all. So, I kind of hop around, and I'm a bit known here and there in certain places, and you kind of get, so that you get the trans rights activists, where like there's like about they're probably just shy of 2,000 accounts that have blocked me because I'm a trans trader. on Twitter so far. So, you're blocked from that angle, so you can't really engage with, and it's not even really trans people, they're non-binary, woke, ally type people. Like, very few of them have actually transitioned in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And then on the other extreme end, there are radical feminists, and I kind of am deciding that turfs, some of the extreme turfs, I think gender criticals are probably a bit more moderate. They seem a bit more moderate in my experience, and they're kind of willing to be like, they don't really believe there's any true trans thing, but they kind of accept that this phenomenon is probably not going anywhere anytime soon. So, like, and it wasn't really transsexuals that kicked this off. So, are you going to try to punish someone that isn't guilty of, setting this thing in motion? And then there's another in the extreme realm, they're like, we don't care, you participated, you're all guilty, kind of thing. So you kind of cop it from all ends, but that is in no way unique. Like, if you're a like, so if you're a trans rights activist, then you cop it from every angle in that. Like, so you've got, like, kind of like based trans people, which is trans people that are reality based, so know that know that they can't change their biological sex and blah 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 blah, and think that that you shouldn't transition kids, and that women's sports should be left alone, and like that whole thing. So they get attacked by base transsexuals, they get attacked by TERFs, they get attacked by GCs, they get attacked within their own group. Then the same thing happens in the TERF camps as well. You have to be pure enough. Gender critical camps, like, there is, like, kind of like this never ending kind of like picking at everybody that happens. So I've kind of gotten off pretty scot-free, to be honest. Like,
See, that's the thing though. Like, who is representational of that community? Like, who is the voice of trans? So, like, if you were going to form like a trans voice to Parliament, like, who would it be? Would it be you? Would it be Roxanne Tickle? Would it be, like, I mean, who, like, who is indicative? And I mean, I've got an opinion, but, like,
I still kind of think, because I'm bumping into more and more, like, because what used to happen was that you went through the process to transition, you got, assessed, you started the hormones, did whatever surgeries you were going to do, got everything in place, and then you went off and lived your life. And you weren't politically involved in trans stuff. Like, you just, you left that bit. You didn't leave it behind, in terms of you take yourself with you everywhere you go. And not many people are able to live stealth lives, and not many people actually want to live fully stealth lives, because it can get very lonely. Like, you kind of make sense if people know everything about you. So I still think that there are more transsexual type people that are just existing out in the different pockets of society, that are only just starting to become aware of what's really going on now. Like, I keep bumping into more and more people that have been transitioned for like 30 odd years, that are rocking up, that are like hardcore old-fashioned conservatives, mainly in the US. They're rocking up, they're gun-toting fucking conservative Bible thumper types that are like, what the hell is going on? Like, so I kind of think,
let's go.
I I kind of think that politically speaking, because the left is cool, and it has kind of worked itself into the whole cultural Marxism thing, has been on the ascendant in youth culture for quite some time now. So they certainly have the loudest voices, and a lot of it is like ally stuff as well. So it's like people that aren't in any way, like, they barely even know any trans people, that are like, I believe in trans rights. And it's like, well, what trans rights do you believe in? I don't know, like, you know, like people that are
I
just
like the idea.
mouthing slogans. They just want to be nice, kind of stuff. There's a new kind of body that Buck has set up with a few others called Transsexual Unity that are basically just about building bridges. They're like, you know, like we're transsexuals, we know who we are, we know what we're not, like we don't want to blow the world up. We just want to exist, you know, peacefully and
Live and let
get
live.
along with other people. We're not interested in stealing other people's rights. And they do these spaces every week on Twitter, which have been really good. And there was this woman that I don't even like yesterday that I don't even think she'd actually ever met trans people before. And she sat in this space, and it's an audible space, so you can't see each other, but you can hear each other. And some people, you know, have mics, and other people just listen. Um, and she was in there for like a good 40, 50 minutes before she started talking, and she had listened to nothing that had been like basically everything that had been said right up to the point where she took the mic was like, this is insane, this is not okay, this is not representing us, like we are doing everything in our power, talking to politicians, writing letters, you know, like doing everything in our power to try and let people know that this isn't us, like we don't like this isn't, you know, no.
Yeah, not in my name.
Yeah, pretty much. And she gets up and she's like, oh, I just think this trans genocide, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what genocide? Please show me where the genocide is. Like, do you have any comprehension whatsoever how loaded that term is historically? Like, it's just offensive to use this word in relation to anything trans. Like, it's the best time ever to, you know, to be trans in terms of, you know, freedom and acceptance, and these people are getting a little bit of pushback and squawking like the world is on fire, kind of Chicken Little style. But yeah, it's kind of funny. Actually, shortly after that, there was a young, I think he's a Floridian trans guy who is
What? Sorry.
He's from Florida, so
Oh,
he's like,
Florida. Yeah. Okay.
I think he's like 25-ish, passing, for the most part. Kind of, he's either very, very, very well read, or he is a university graduate. He sounds very educated. He kind of does the whole woke lingo. And he was talking about people not understanding why society is set up the way that it is. He was talking about because what they've done, from what I gather, what they've done in Florida, what DeSantis has done is basically, if you want to get trans healthcare in any way, shape, or form, you must go to a doctor, which seems fine to you and me, like, of course. But if you've been getting your hormones from a nurse practitioner,
Oh. Oh, that's like that. That's like that chap that you spoke to on one of your. Yes. Yeah, I recall that conversation now. Yeah, that was
yeah,
a brilliant interview, by the way. Well done. I do. You know, I'm going to come out and plug your show. Make sure you do watch Kev's show. But yeah, no.
yeah. So he's kind of, you know, so it kind of they've gone from they this overwhelming. Actually, I don't know that for a fact. So they loosened the laws around who could give out this medication to the point where it seems like any man and their dog can do it. So nurse practitioners are signing people up, assessing people with the assistance of endocrinologists and other doctors, I believe. So there's kind of been this, you know, like you can just go and see your nurse practitioner and it's not very expensive and blah 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 blah. That's suddenly been cut off. And there's lots of misinformation going around, like, oh, they've just cut all trans healthcare. You can't get any hormones. The whole state's it's now a dry state kind of thing, which I don't think is true. I'm pretty sure isn't true. Pardon me, but this young guy is in this space talking about the people that can't afford to go to the doctor, and you know, like all of the sub stories, which are kind of genuine, but it's like, well, you know, what are you going to do? and he started talking about trans genocide this and trans genocide that, and Laura kind of pushed back on him a bit because she was in control of the room and she's very based, like no bullshit as well. Um, and he started talking about misgendering laws as though that they are, like they're hurting people's feelings, and they really shouldn't be able to say anything that they want to anybody, and blah 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 blah. And like these, like it's like the domestic violence laws and the rape laws, and you shouldn't have to wait until the crime is committed to 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 stop somebody in their tracks. And it's just like like
Really?
and
Really?
and I kind of was like, dude, like I didn't actually have a mic in that space, so I didn't say anything. But it's like this lovely idea of protecting people is at the heart of that thought.
Yeah, it is.
Not really thinking along the lines of, what happens to that, like, what happens when people that you don't like have that power to use it against you, like it's a very communistic kind of,
Yeah.
like the Gestapo kind of, they start coming around and collecting people for thought crimes. And gay and lesbian people have not done very well in those regimes historically.
No.
What makes you think
Yeah.
it's going to end up any better this time, Chief?
Yeah.
Like just this fundamental lack of comprehension
Of historical context.
of what
Yep.
the hell is going on here and why. It's like,
Again, it's not knowing your history. Jordan Peterson talks about this all the time. But hey, do you feel like you're being weaponized? Like in
um,
this entire debate?
I don't take things very personally. The idea of trans absolutely is being weaponized. Like trans is a medical process. Like it's not an identity. It's not, something that you wear, like this whole non-binary trans thing. No, sorry, non-binary isn't trans. Trans is you go through a medical process and live your life the best that you are able in the opposite role. That's what trans is. In terms of trans, pardon me, transgender or transsexual, transvestite has kind of been, but they have kind of opened this umbrella up into it is just everything that anybody wants it to be. If you are slightly gender unconforming in your personality, then you're non-binary, which then makes you trans. Or if you're like a girl that is kind of a little bit more masculine than the average girl, then you're non-binary and that's trans. And it's like in that terms, yeah, absolutely, it has been weaponized. I kind of have a lot of personal distance between that though, because it like getting upset and angry, like I'm kind of pushing back against it in every way that I know how. Like I speak out about it on a regular basis, on social media and in person, and have done different events and stuff. So I don't really see the point in getting angry about it. Like, I just don't get heated about that sort of stuff personally. Like,
Mm.
it annoys me in my brain, but I don't get emotionally involved in that
Yeah.
way, because I don't see any profit in that.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm the same way with BLM. It's just like, when you stop killing our people, pigs.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, it is being weaponized, and it has been for quite some time. But it's not something that I take particularly personally. It's something that I spend a lot of time fighting against and pushing back on, but it's not something that I didn't have any personal control in implementing it. Like, it's not something I
Yeah.
wanted.
The
It's not
ways,
something
yeah,
that
the
benefits
way's bigger than you. But
yeah.
why is the West, especially the Anglosphere, and also continental Europe, I suppose, why this phenomenon at this time? Like, why are we obsessed with this trans phenomenon now? Like, what's going on?
um I think it is sorry. I think that it is indicative of the state of decline. Like apparently the Romans and you know, like late stage empires always, you know, they do the celebrity chef thing, and then they do the weird kinky sex stuff and the trans stuff, and, and then then the empire falls. I kind of think that we are at, it's not that we don't have massive social problems. Um, I think that niche social problems, like in terms of what's cool and groovy and, you know, looks really great on the resume, trans and LGBT stuff is pretty up there, you know. And they already had all of the like social, like communal, political machinery kind of in place. Like 2010 already existed, Acon already existed, like they had this massive body of, like, this massive engine that was already like completely chugging along and fully funded, you know, like it's probably a $1 million, if not $1 billion industry just in Australia alone. Get gay marriage, are you going to then pack the whole thing down and go home?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I kind of think that it is,
It's an industry. Partially.
yeah, it's an industry, and I think that it's a I think it's a reflection on just the level of excess that we live amongst. That this is, you know,
Yeah. First world problems.
somehow the most important issue of, you know, one of the most important issues of our time, like 0.7% of the population, if that.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You
But
know?
mate, look, I don't know where you are politically now. We'll kind of like go back to that. How would you define yourself politically on the political spectrum? And if you wouldn't mind describing your metamorphosis from being extremely left-wing by your own admission and discussion, to what I suppose could be described as a, well, I won't use the word conservative, but, you know, but in however you see yourself to wherever you are now.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of was, well, I married a person whose engineering degree was solar cells and wind turbines, which should give you, you know, like a pretty good indication. You know, very greeny. I think the last election was the first time that I didn't vote for the Greens in my entire adult life. Um, I wouldn't even have voted for Labor pre this, and now I'm voting Liberal. Yeah, so I like Labor would have been a sellout for me. I voted. There were a few kooky when I was 18, 19, 20. There were a few kooky kind of socialist Democrat candidates in Newtown that won 2% of, you know, probably 2% of the vote, if that I voted for. So I was very, you know, I'm sure Lachlan Murdoch is a lovely man personally, but come the revolution, his back's against the wall. Like, you know, I was totally fine with that sort of rhetoric. Very left, very, you know, anti-establishment, you know, very into, you know, like my life is very, you know, kind of kink friendly and BDSM friends and stuff like that. Like I've moved in those circles for, you know, pretty much my entire adult life. It's not really, it's not necessarily my thing to that, you know, but you know, that it's interesting, and I found myself moving similarly in those circles or around the outside of those circles, social circles. So I kind of, yeah, you know, Lachlan Murdoch back against the wall type, you know, greeny type person who would have just believed the slogans, like the whole, you know, we need to net zero, like fuck the consequences, like it wouldn't, I would not have stopped. I probably would have stopped at the last minute to go, well, hold on a minute, if that means that old people can't, you know, I was never seriously radical. I just had some radical beliefs. So it's kind of weird because I was very close to my grandparents who were like, you know, born in the 1910, 1911 kind of era. So I do have a lot of traditional values. And one of the things that I've started to realize is like working class people, lower socioeconomic type people, like the working poor tend to be very conservative.
Yeah.
That is one of the that's one of the things that the liberal elites really don't
I get
understand.
it.
It's kind of striking me more and more and more as I kind of get further into this. I'm like, you know, like I'll talk to my friends who are, raising their 5 kids from different fathers on, like the pension, and they'll start talking about, something that's slightly racist, like right, but slightly racist, or dole bludgers, or you didn't earn that, they shouldn't be able to get away with that, like kind of getting really upset and worked up about you know the welfare state that they are
One Nation.
from, like
Yeah.
they have this weird, like there's this weird dichotomy of, I'll take it if I don't have to work and you'll give me something, then I'm going to take it, but that doesn't mean that I believe in it or that I agree with it.
Yeah. I'm just
There's
an opportunist. I'm a raccoon. I'm just,
Yeah,
I'm just an
like
opportunist here. It's like,
you're going to
oh,
give it to me and I don't have to work and I get to watch my kids grow up and, hang at home and get $1,500, then of course I'm going to take it. Why wouldn't I? I'd be an idiot. But you're dumb as shit for doing that. Like, you should make me go and work. Like, and they kind of have used it as a launching pad. Like they'll study part-time until their last kid hits 16, and then, by the time their last kid hits 16, they have like a degree in something or other, or they're quite clever about it. But it's been very interesting in that, like, all of this social welfare. I was in a space earlier, someone was talking about people, the working poor, and they were referring to economic violence against the working poor, which was just insane. Like, it was insane rhetoric. But yeah, so I kind of was a kind of a libtard lefty, believed in kind of the revolution, but I wasn't really going to do anything to help. But at the same time, I also kind of have traditional, you should work for what you earn kind of views. Like, if you're going to open a business and take the risk, then it's reasonable that you get the profit of, so long as you are fair with your employees, then, like, if you take the risk, then you should reap the reward kind of thing. So I kind of always believed in that kind of armchair socialist type stuff, while also being heavily influenced by, probably my grandparents. My mum comes from a big family, so kind of that, coastal kind of work ethic kind of,
yeah.
my mum was born in 47, so it would have been the 50s, the 60s, but the 60s weren't really radical in Australia, or on the central, or, on the north coast. So kind of traditional, but also had kind of political skew views. Having bumped into Edmund Burke and starting to realize why the system is set up the way that it is, and realizing that, like, the law of the jungle is kind of the natural state. Like, the strong survive and the weak perish is kind of the natural state of affairs. So what we have is, while we take it for granted and while it's less than perfect, it kind of is set up in the best way that can be set up if you want people to have the most freedom that they can have. Like, it kind of seems to me
Yeah.
probably the cleverest way to go about it, compared to, like, I could be wrong about this, but under communist, kind of states, you don't even get to choose. Like, you're just going to be a doctor, Matt. Like,
Yeah.
go pick up a book. Like, you don't get to choose what you do. You don't get to choose where you live. You might get paid, you might not. Like,
Well,
like
in China,
everything
when I in
sounds kind
China
of
was
good.
there, I don't know exactly the way it played out, but in China, when I was there was a whole bunch of students who were studying teaching, and I was talking to one, and she goes, I really don't want to be a teacher. Like, I've been doing this for 2 years. And I was like, oh, well, change degrees. She goes, I can't. I'm like, what? She goes, well, they gave me a choice of what I wanted to do. I indicated this. I've been put in it. I'm not paying for it. I'm going to be a teacher. And I'm like, oh,
yeah.
So you can't change jobs? She goes, well, can, after I kind of like get this, but I got to do a bit of time to pay back the state. But like I could after that, but like, you know, what is there? Like, what am I going to do? Go start up a business? I don't know anything about that. Like, you know, sell vegetables on the street. Like that's, yeah. So it's kind of like a lot of the times, sometimes it does appear that you are locked in. So there was that obligation. It's like, no, kind of like you're paying the state back, a HECS debt, really. It's like, yeah, we paid for your higher education. Get out there. You're doing however it is many years. It's indentured servitude, really.
Don't you want to be in that classroom?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I kind of am coming to the I kind of am. I've seen a little bit of John Howard. I'm kind of pretty busy with the AWW stuff, like reading lots of curriculum and like doing other things. I'm working 3 jobs at the moment, trying to get some stuff going. So I haven't got a lot of time, but it kind of seems to me that like the Philip Ruddock, and as much as like I wanted to drive them down in my car when I was in my early 20s, like just this stuff that they would say, like the John Howard cabinet would say, that was just so outrageously like brutally honest. And I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to fucking get a job. Like, sucks to be you. Like, that sort of stuff where it's like, what do you mean I'm not entitled to do everything that I want? And it's like, it's also this kind of mass delusion of like we're owed stuff. Like you're really not. Like you need to go out and make something of yourself. Like that is how you find meaning, and that's the best thing for you as well as everybody else. And everybody else kind of has a stake in you doing that, as you know what I mean. Like it kind of is. I'm kind of getting to that point where it's like, that whole, like teach a man to fish kind of.
Yeah. So what are you now? You're a Howardite? Would you bring back John Howard? Would you?
It's so funny. It's so unlikely. But like I'm kind of starting to get to the place where I'm like, actually, not only does he have a point, I think he's probably quite right. Like, shit.
Yeah.
I still kind of find myself around the edges, kind of trying to resist and being like, no, no, no. But like I probably am.
But how did that happen? Like, were you mugged by reality? Were you like with this evolution of ideas and ideology? And again, like you really are a transitional figure in so many ways.
There's so many people that are doing the exact same, and I'm bumping into older people that have like I think it's also an age thing as well.
Yeah, it's an age thing. Yeah.
I'm almost 50 at this point, and I think people kind of start to. There's this weird thing that happens with time that I like that you can't really explain, but you realize how quickly things change and how fleeting things are, and how much of culture is just forgotten. Like it just drops off the edge of a cliff, like I'm trying to explain to people how important ideas were in the 90s and how unthinkable it was to disagree with them. And they just don't get it. Like it's like, I may as well be talking to the wall. They're like, yeah, whatever. That makes no sense to me. And those ideas have kind of dropped off a cultural cliff in terms of, people have just forgotten that was ever the case. So trying to bring it up now is kind of irrelevant, like it's kind of pointless in many ways. But yeah, I kind of think, I think there's an age thing as well. And I think like
we're getting old. We're not cool anymore.
yeah. And also, like the more the woke manifestation, like the more of it you see, the more batshit it is. Like it is just like it can be as well-meaning as it possibly could be, and a lot of it is, but it's just nonsensical. Like
there's no, and that's it. Like things need internal consistency. That's so important. Like, just to say, hey, look, I've got good intentions. It's not good enough. You know what I mean? And to say, well, my self-image is a good person, not good enough, buddy. Like, if you're contributing, we know that things are going backwards. Like in the Indigenous space, things are going backwards. Like most things are going backwards. And it's despite, or actually probably, let's be honest, because of massive government intervention, heaps of money, empowering all the wrong people. Like, it's just, but again, it's like, well, we have to do something. It's like
it's weird as well, because there are these ideas about compassion and giving money to people to help them lift themselves up out of poverty, that they seem, I think that they appeal to our natural bias towards, like, they just appeal to our natural bias as humans. We want to be compassionate, we want to help.
Yep.
So you don't like what it's like, you don't want to like watch your newborn bawl their eyes out. You want to pick them up and comfort them, you know, like, and that's appropriate for a newborn. But as you toddler, you know, like as the kid gets older, they need to fall, they need to figure things out for themselves. And watching people, like on a governmental level, watching people like not do as well as other people, or you know, fail at competition or whatever, like that's painful to watch, and you want to jump in. And it kind of seems to kind of play to our natural sense of, you know, being nice to other people, not letting them suffer. But it's untested. These are all of these lefty ideas, and throwing billions of dollars at Indigenous culture and letting self ID people just willy nilly go into whatever space they want. Like, these are completely untested ideas.
well, that's the
No,
only thing that's the only thing I'd respectfully disagree with. They have been tested.
well,
Like, you know, like in this idea of splitting, let's use the, you know, the voice example. So we're going to start dividing up the country and giving different amounts of political power to different people along the lines of race. Well, that was tried in South Africa right up until about 1993. It's like, yeah, no, we tried that. Wasn't kind of good. And with self-identification, you actually see that back in, you know, back in Greece. Like, you know, if you go way back, well, you read Ovid's Metamorphosis. That's part of it. This idea that you can, well, it's a visualization. You know, this is a big oversimplification. There's some idea is like what you visualize yourself, you can become, and that's kind of a Christian idea too. Like, you know, it depends on what you're aiming at. Like, you know, if you visualize yourself as a potential saint and try seriously start acting that way, well, yeah. But again, what are you going to be mediated by? Are you guided by truth and driven by love? Or like, so, you know, then the Jordan Peterson idea of like, are you in the Logos? Just because you want to be a saint, you need something to mediate the potential of you doing that with the finite reality of who you are. But so these conservative ideas you're talking about, you know, what would you protect? What values? What institutions?
I don't know, because I got a poor education in this subject. Like, government, absolutely, like, no questions. Like,
Yeah.
I think it needs to be shrunk down pretty significantly. I quite like John Anderson's podcast. He's quite a thoughtful guy. Also outrageous that I would say that if you knew half of what I speak.
Yeah. Yeah, 1993 Kev is hating on you right now.
I used to
2003
actually
Kev wants to punch 2023 Kev.
I used to actually, yeah, you don't want to know. It was ridiculous. I hated, I could not have hated and had less regard for these guys. Like, everything that came out of their mouths, I detested, basically because it came out of their mouths. It didn't matter what they said. Like, well, what they said was also completely horrific in my eyes, but that they said it was enough. So that I'm agreeing with them now is just
The world's upside down.
I don't know that I know enough to actually have that conversation.
Okay, well, what about a specific issue then, like censorship? Like, what's, you know, what are your
I don't
feelings
think.
on censorship, and would it be okay to censor something, and if so, where? Like, you know, where do we draw the line on that?
Oh, that's.
Because that's something that you've faced and you have personal knowledge of, you know, having been.
I don't. When it comes to books like this,
Sorry, what does it do? Pardon my ignorance.
it's the Welcome to Sex video that I sent you the other day. Big W. I've got a
Yes.
copy of it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. No, I haven't watched the
300.
video, but yeah. So that's the book that's in schools, isn't it?
No, it was in Big W.
Okay.
It's marketed to 11 to 15-year-olds. The
What does it
author
say?
like the author was like, I'd be fine with an 8-year-old, a mature 8-year-old going through this book. I hate this book. This is outrageous. I hate that this book exists. Do I think it should be censored? Probably it should be for 18-year-olds, like 16 to 18-year-olds, maybe. Like, that's the thing. Like, there's the whole censorship. You should be at free speech should be free unless you're directly provably harming somebody, like screaming fire in a burning building. Like, I kind of go along with that. But there are now some newer issues that I don't know. Like, if there's a book that is marketed to 8 to 15-year-olds that is basically pornographic, should that be censored, or is it just age inappropriate? I'm not sure.
Mate, I was back, and I'll just tell a quick anecdote just to, I suppose, just to discuss it. I used to be in what was then the Juvenile Aid Bureau. It's now called the Child Protection Investigation Unit. So we dealt with kids as victims and kids as offenders, and obviously there's a big correlation there. And I was having a discussion with a senior detective at the time I was driving out to a job, because that NAMBLA, North American Man Boy Love Association, had just come on our radar, and all this, you know, the internet was just starting to kick off. I didn't really understand it. We had like the boffiny guys that were kind of like doing that kind of stuff, and the image downloading and all that. And I made the observation. I said, I reckon that this group is going to become extremely powerful. I said, I think there's going to be a serious sexualization of children in the future. And it's going to be around rights, and it's going to be around that. And the senior detective said to me, he goes, no, he goes, I get where you're coming from. And it's not that isn't a compelling argument. And because NAMBLA made that, like their slogan was sex before 8 or else it's too late. And he said, look, but there's more parents, and they're the ones that are going to stand up to that. He goes, you'll get these, and he said perverts. He goes, you're going to get these perverts that, and they are. You know, these perverts that kind of like want that and do that kind of stuff. They're into that. You're going to get people who, the libertines who go, well, you know, hey, whatever, you know, rings the bell, and if their parents let them happen, and like it, you know, but no. And I said, well, let's look at ancient Greece and Rome. Like, people used to literally sell their kids into slavery, sexual slavery. Like, there were sexual slaves. Like, that used to happen, you know. The magnificent Helen Dale talks about this. Yeah, she talks about that as well. I go, so, and we can't just rely on the nature of human beings. Like, we need like back to the beginning of our conversation, we need like a higher force. Like, you need to prostrate yourself before the Buddha. You need to prostrate yourself before, you know, the thing to go, well, there's this thing that is beyond my conceptualization. And yeah, it may actually be a good idea at the time, because it's better to be shagged than to starve to death. Like, I didn't do it at, you know, arguments like that, but mate.
Yeah, because I don't like, if I hadn't seen this book, then I'd be like, absolutely, I think absolute free speech. I think there should be very few limits on speech, you know, blah 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 blah, because your free speech is what basically allowed me to transition, like freedom of speech, freedom of expression. Like, you know, I kind of expected to always be on the fringe, and let's face it, I am, and I'm fine with that. Like that's kind of what the understanding social contract was, you know,
Kind of
like
fringe dwelling.
yeah, you know, like
Kind of
you
marginal.
know, go off and quietly live your life and like shh, kind of, you know, understand your place. And most trans people are absolutely fine with that. That's totally cool. Um, I'm now totally fine with I would totally be fine with censoring this book, like absolutely no questions asked. And I don't know how that fits. Like maybe it should be a censorship board thing where it's like, no, that book is for 18, like 17, 18, 19-year olds, like, but not, you know, 11-year-olds. Cause it's like, how old are your kids? Like, I'm not around many kids, but I think 11 is pretty fucking young.
Oh
Like
yeah.
fifth grade, isn't it?
But you can see though when you watch, and especially this is the old JB detect. I didn't get my detective's appointment, but this is the old. I held a spot there. This is the old JB investigator in me. You get trained on this stuff. You can see sexualized behavior really early. Like seriously, you really can. And mate, you get this. I think we might have even said this in one of our interviews in the past, but like one of the peds that, because I interviewed and been quite a few peds, but most of them actually want to talk to you. And one of them was really wanted this, this record of interview and was shagging this 9-year-old. And so I brought this guy into the record of interview, sit him down, and I said, tell me what happened. And he goes, look, I know this looks bad, and I know you're judging me and you think I'm a bad person, but this is what happened. He goes, look, this girl seduces me. And, this is almost the exact words of the record of interview. And I can't say no. Like, I don't like doing it, but like, she wants it. I kind of want it. So it's like,
I kind of want it, like,
well, I kind of want it. Yeah, wanted it a lot. And, and mate, he would get her to do things to him because he was getting elderly too. So he kind of like needed stimulation to get himself going.
I get you.
Yeah. And I won't go into the details because like, I took the victim statement too and other things that, and this 9-year-old girl, the point being is this 9-year-old girl was like, oh, and he likes this. And when I do this and like, and I know, and I was saying to her, like, it was true though. Like there was a degree of truth to what this guy was saying. So he'd be there at home and she'd go around, knock on his door and go, hey, look, I will do this and this and this to you for this. So she wanted alcohol and she wanted food because she came from a terribly broken home. And so she wasn't getting food. So a lot of it was just for food. But like some of it was for alcohol. She was drinking, like she was 9. And but she knew, like she hadn't hit puberty yet, but she knew this stuff. And it wasn't just because, like, yes, a lot of it was because she'd been exposed to, like, dysfunctional just really isn't the word for the background that she came from. But she still, everybody's got it. And you see that flirty behavior in kids. Like you see it. Like my girls were doing it, like, really early. And not consciously.
Yeah.
Just like they're getting these strange feelings and they're getting this attention from people. And it's like, sexuality is just it's a deep part of who we are. Like it's just such a, like it's an inherent part. It's not like nothing. There it is.
Yeah.
It's more like
you don't wake up on your 18th birthday and whoa, what's
you're getting hard-ons. Like,
new world?
no, you're having sexual dreams like when when you're really young. So it's like this coming into the use of Jordan Peterson phrase. It's coming into resolution. That's what happened. It goes from low resolution to high resolution. But look, I know you're a great fan of JBP, Jordan Peterson, and I am too. And to a certain degree, I really want to discuss that. And to a certain degree, obviously, you're being influenced, by that thought now. when you made the decision to transition, who was influencing you back then? Like who were you modeling yourself on? Like who were your role models back then?
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think I think that way. I don't really pedestal people. So I I kind of there's an ethic that I got, and kind of like an old it's kind of like an old-fashioned moral right and wrong kind of it's almost conservative, but it's probably traditional would be the better word.
How
Like
would I?
hard, yeah, like a hard-working kind of
Yeah.
morality thing that I don't know, that just always appealed to me. Um, yeah, I don't like transition. I kind of was in, and this is one of the things. Like I was already in a very strange position socially pre-transition because I was, people just didn't know what to make of me. Like
Yeah.
I was super masculine, and I kind of passed a bit, and I was very odd in a gendered kind of way. It didn't really, like, it wasn't a problem. Like I kind of liked being a bit freaky. It wore over time, so I kind of transitioned knowing that the day to day that I was basically trading one weird social position for another. Like this one's slightly more complicated because I'm not what I appear to be. Like I'm not a man, but I look like a man. This is much more comfortable, but it's more complicated. And I'm kind of more embodied this way as well. But I didn't really model, because at the time there was a lot of, you should like work on like speaking in like lower down in your throat, which I never bothered to do. I never tried to monitor my hand movements, or I didn't really change the way I walked, or like there was lots of this transitional how to make you, stand up, and like I never really bothered with all of that sort of stuff. I was always kind of, yeah, I don't think I've ever really consciously modeled myself off any collection of people, other than probably just the like the traditional kind of stuff, work ethic, morality type
Yeah.
thing from my grandparents,
Yeah.
which is probably why Jordan Peterson appeals to me,
Mm.
even though, I kind of think he kind of goes off the deep end in a few small ways. Like that doesn't make any sense, but yeah, I don't agree with him about everything, but I believe that he is an honest actor trying to do the best that he can, and he's so articulate. Like he thinks about things on just a completely different level, that when he says stuff you're like, oh, of course,
Of
but you
course.
wouldn't,
Yeah.
it'd take you 20 years to even start getting to, he's read basically everything, I would imagine. He seems to be a person that spent at least 20 or 30 years of his adult life basically just educating himself about, everything that interested him.
Mm. Yeah. So let's talk marginality then. Like, you're a kind of marginal person. And look, I'll say this too, like in some way, every human being
Yeah.
is marginal in some space, you know what I mean? But like, should marginal ideas and marginal people be in the middle? Like, what's what's, and where is the place? So
It
where
seems
where
to
do people like you fit in so that, I mean, for me, it's pretty easy, just live and let live. I mean, and I
Yeah.
really enjoy your company, actually. And believe me, if I ever come to steak and kidney, we're going to go drink some
Yeah.
beers. But like, um, Like, where's your place? Where would you be comfortable? Where do you think it's fair? Where is it, that has respect to
I
others?
kind of think like people I kind of follow Catherine Deves a bit, and she keeps saying, like what trans rights, what trans rights are you trying to articulate? Like, what don't you have? And she never gets an answer because there is no answer. We already had like trans people had marriage rights before gay people in Australia, thanks to Kevin and Jennifer case. Um, I kind of think that it is up to me. I kind of, especially in this kind of like, okay, so we have rights. No one's being discriminated against on a daily basis. Like, you're not legally allowed to discriminate against, you're like, you can't fire me, you can't kick me out, you can't, because I'm gay or because I'm trans, it makes no difference. Like, there's a pretty level playing field in terms of you you have more or less an equal chance to participate as everybody else. Like, you do the work, you can get in the door. I kind of think that's fair enough, Like, and I was part of a generation of trans people, and that was kind of the shock. That is the thing that kind of shocked me the most, realizing what woke trans stuff actually meant was that they blew this out of the water, where it's like I'm allowed to transition, I'm allowed to change my documents so that I have, like my right to privacy is upheld. It's the kind of the social contract is that because the flip side, the responsibility of that right to privacy is that I have a responsibility to disclose to people when and where they need to know. Like, that's something that should be taken seriously, because transition is ultimately kind of a privilege of the modern age that shouldn't be, like, that's not something that should be taken lightly. I kind of think in the modern world where, you can't be discriminated against, blah 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 blah, it's up to trans people to largely fit around other people. It's not a one way, like, it's not necessarily for everybody else to drop everything and come running to trans people, because, you know, like, I don't think that is the way that you get respect. I don't think that is the way you build bridges. Like,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah, requiring other people to act. I think that's why, Jordan Peterson's stance resonated. It's like, no, I'm willing to tolerate a lot. Like, this idea, and that's it too, the other lie that the woke thing, and the left generally, I'll say, is like, oh, this is such an unjust, unfair society. In fact, it's defined by its unfairness and justice. It's like bullshit. Like, this is a fair, just society full of decent people.
yeah.
Yeah.
Please show me a fairer and juster
Yeah.
society that has existed at any point before now. Like,
It's exactly right.
such an indulgence, this whole, like, and I used to do it as well. I used to do it as well. So let's not be too judgmental. But it kind of is the ultimate, like, the burning of the American flag is the ultimate sign of the freedom that Americans hold. Like, there are a lot of Americans that find that practice abhorrent.
Yeah.
But it kind of is, you know what I mean? Like, that
Yeah.
you can criticize the society that we live in is the ultimate reflection upon, like, of how good you have it. Like, you can start talking about, I'm an anarchist and I'm anti-government and I'm this, that, and the other, and you actually, sleep soundly at night and don't get woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning by people in black cars. Like, you're doing okay.
Yeah.
Realistically, like, you know,
Yeah.
and I kind of think that we have collectively forgotten that over time. Like, it kind of is like the power structures tilt towards tyranny over time, and comfortable people tilt towards apathy over time. Like, there hasn't been a big war, or in a couple of generations. Like, we kind of have fallen asleep thinking that we are hard done by when we are the luckiest humans that have ever existed. Like, you know, time and place.
Yeah. It's so odd. Like I just find this thing, and that's why I genuinely see it as like, I don't see it as political. I see this as a religious thing. Like it's a religious trope.
Yeah.
Playing out. But what do you disagree with? We're getting right down to it. Brass tacks now. So JBP, like, I mean, I really can't think of much that I disagree with him on.
Some of the trans stuff, like there's, and I'm going to have a conversation with like I speak to a few ROGD mums. Do you know what that is?
No.
So the social contagion girls that decide in classes of 30 that they're all trans masculine people, and some of them start transitioning. There are a few of the mothers that have, some of the daughters are lesbian and they're gender non-conforming, and the mother's been thinking for the last 12 years, I have a little lesbian on my hands. That's totally cool. That's totally fine, whatever. And then the kid starts going through puberty at a point where all of this trans stuff is happening and their friends are, trans is just the coolest thing you can be. And suddenly the mum's looking down and the kid's a bit tall and a bit, masculine. And suddenly the mum's like, oh shit, my kid thinks that they are trans. Like, what am I going to do? Like, how am I? And the parents have like literally no legal rights to stop this at this point. Like, you can't, if your kid comes home and says, I'm trans, and you don't affirm, depending on where you are, you can lose custody. Like in Australia, like in Canada, I think in New Zealand, like it's some pretty serious.
What, the government will take your kid, or like
the police? Yeah. Anyway, so moving along. So these parents are like, holy fuck, how do I negotiate my kid through this? Because my kid literally thinks that they're trans. So I end up having a number of conversations with those sorts of mothers, like where they're, like, I can see that you're trans. I see that it worked out. There are a few where they're like, my kid probably will be trans when they get to 18, but where I'm trying, like, they're trying to navigate their daughter to 18 without really socially transitioning, without really, any hormones, like this narrow bandwidth where they are negotiating powerlessly with their kid and only using their influence and, like trying to get their kid to adulthood. Sorry, I forgot why I was telling you that now. I speak to a number of those sorts of mothers predominantly.
JVP.
They kind of seek me out, and just some of them just want to see what trans guys actually look like. Like, they just want to see, like, is this going to be okay if I get my kid to 18 and they decide they're going to transition into adulthood? Is this the worst, like, how bad is this going to be? Like, and I'll have, frank conversations with them and stuff like that. Why was I telling you this? I've forgotten completely now. JP. So in the weight and the Chloe Cole thing, like, so he's seeing it from the cultural war perspective, where there is only the social contagion. He was a bit skeptical about the whole transitional thing to start with. So he's kind of very, very anti, which is completely understandable. And I get where he's coming from. I think in some places his rhetoric is probably a little bit too hard because we just don't know. Like, there's like, from my perspective, without being, completely delusional, you see the same pattern over and over and over again in insane trans people, which is a lot more than people realize, because we disappear. So you only see the crazies. The same thing happens over and over and over again, like within yeah, when you see trans guys and passing trans women and, like, yeah, conservative people, you see enough to realize that we may not fully understand this, we may not know what this is, but there's kind of something here that, and because it's such a way out wacky, there hasn't been a lot of funds, there hasn't been a lot of research, like, the nature of the community is that most of it is completely invisible and scattered just far and wide. So how do you get everybody together and come up with actual proper real studies that say You know what I mean? Like it kind of, there's just a lot of gray area here that I think he's decided, and in some ways he's right. He's decided that cultural contagion is so risky and so dangerous that at his level of platform being having like talking about things with nuance at all is probably going to get lost in the crowd. Like he's such a big platform that
Yeah.
you know he has to be very consistent and it has to be a very simple message and he's speaking, you know what so I kind of disagree with him about a few bits and bots around the edges. Like I agree with him about most things and I agree with him about the social contagion. I agree with him about women's sports. I agree with him about, you know, all manner of things. Puberty blockers. I don't think anyone should be transitioning, you know, pre-17 at the absolute most, like, you know, for the worst cases where they've been under care for years and years and years up until that point and they've tried everything and, you know, like kind of worst case scenario type stuff. I kind of think, you know, there are a few areas where, you know, I have some trans friendly views, surprise, surprise. But yeah, you know, like it's just around the edges, like for the most part. And I kind of can you can also see why he's saying the things that he says. So I don't like, you know,
No
I've
begrudging.
like
Yeah.
like Claire kind of took a lot of things very personally and stopped watching him because she was like she's also a psychologist or it has psychology training.
Sorry, Claire.
Claire Ray Randall is a woman that I did a trans woman I did a chat with recently. She stopped watching him because she was like, this is outrageous. And he hasn't looked at all of the Diamond Milton, you know, like the guy that has done the most research into the trans phenomenon, a transsexual phenomenon, like no one has looked at, and Helen Joyce didn't look at it, and blah, 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 blah. So she stopped watching him. I kind of have a more sympathetic view, probably because I speak to more parents
Yeah.
than Claire is aware of.
Yeah. And look, I think something else that really concerns him was that New Zealand psychologist, John Money, I think.
Yeah.
The name was, who, I mean, other than seeing that podcast and the discussion with, like, that guy just seems to be a weirdo, deviant pervert who destroyed the lives of
A
some
couple of
people
kids, yeah. And then
to
there's
satisfy his own.
yeah, and then there's Alfred Kinsey as well,
Yeah,
um,
Kinsey. Yeah.
who I watch it. I never really understood. I didn't quite double back to find out why some of the mums were talking about Alfred Kinsey like he was the devil, and I was like, well, I'll take your word for it, because I trust you, and you know, like they're my friends, so you know, I know they're not liars. But I was like, I don't really I don't understand this. And then I watched this documentary about his tables of orgasms, and I was like, holy fuck, how could that like how did people just sleepwalk past that for decades,
Yeah.
like decades? Um, but they kind of do this thing where they're like, and this is
Could you
like,
explain that for the listeners?
do you want me to?
Yeah.
So he basically did like they were talking about child orgasms,
Yep.
and there's this table of how many orgasms, you know, 3 month, 4 month olds, 4 year olds, you know, 5 year olds, 6 year olds, whatever, so on and so forth. And one of them, I think, was like a 4 year old or a 4 month old that had 26 orgasms in 24 hours, which, like, and then when you go down to the like to the asterisk kind of thing, they start talking about orgasms looked like fainting, having fits, screaming, crying, you know, like these kids were in terror, and they were described as orgasms, like just like my brain can't process that information, like it's like it just bounces out, like I can't actually think about it. As soon as I start to try and focus on it, it just it's that horrific. But they kind of do this thing where it's like Kinsey, money, gender ideology, and I kind of like, yeah, I agree, like that absolutely is a pathway, but it doesn't really explain why the youth like science is not really big in the youth culture. Why is the LGBT youth culture, why is this the coolest thing? Like, what is going, like, there's something that A plus B doesn't equal C. Kinsey money, gender ideology, social contagion
There's something else going on.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. And it kind of, for me, is explained by Kinsey money is picked up by Kate Millett, who is one of the original second wave feminists icons, who then popularized. I doubt she really got into the sexual stuff with them that much, though she was bisexual and possibly a little bit kinky. So she probably would have been fine and just glossed over and not noticed the kid stuff. But that got turned into blank slate. There's no biological differences between men and women, which was still queen of the castle in the lesbian community when I came in the 90s. Like, if you said something like men have more upper body strength, which is absolutely true, you would be scoffed and kind of spat at and being like, well, of course women have lower body, they have better lower body muscular strength. And it's like, oh, okay, whatever, that makes sense. But I don't think that's true, is it?
My very basic understanding is, if you define, obviously, the muscles around the room and the cervix as lower body strength and core strength,
Yeah,
the answer would be yes. Leg strength, no. So if you're just thinking, when you say, like, if you say lower body strength, you're thinking being able to run. No, it's more than that. So core body strength, and obviously being able to push a baby out. So yeah.
So there was a lot of thought terminating, just slogan cliche things about like men and women are exactly the same, that was still vitally important. Like, you couldn't get away with saying stuff. Like, you wouldn't get cancelled, but you'd certainly be taken to the woodhouse and schooled. Like, how could you be so stupid? Sort of, ignoramus kind of stuff, where you'd be embarrassed and humiliated publicly by some feminist that was coming at you for being so naive. A lot of those ideas came from I'm pretty sure they stemmed from Kate Millett, which of course then gives, like, they start talking about gender, and that gives Judith Butler the room to come up with gender as a performance, which in some ways it is, but not absolutely. Like,
no,
there are people that are zooming in, same as the like, biological sex is a spectrum somehow, and it's like you are finding the areas there where we can't explain the things that we know. There are question marks around our human knowledge in all manner of areas, but you're finding that in terms of is sex reproductive, is it chromosomal, like this argy-bargy thing. They're finding the areas where they can throw a wedge into people's minds, kind of microscoping down, right down, so that they are like, here you go, here's this kernel of maybe it's this way, maybe it's that way, to confuse people, and then saying, sorry, does this make any sense? Like, they're kind of,
no, it does. It
they're
does.
finding the exception to the rule and zooming down on that to kind of say, this proves that my theory about sex as a spectrum is absolutely true. And it's like,
the existence of grey proves there's no such thing as black or white.
No, exactly. And it's not true. Like, it's not, it never has been true. But that's basically what they're doing.
The other funny thing is, like, because I've spoken to a couple of full-on feminists now, and they've been great conversations, to be honest. But something I wanted to run past you was, one of them said, look, mate, you have to understand this whole trans phenomenon. It's nothing but men's rights activism dressed up. That's all it is. And I was like, well, you can kind of see how that might happen from a male to female perspective. Like, we're coming into your toilets, we're coming into your sports, we're doing this. So these places that women had, you can say that it happened. But I said, because I thought of you when that conversation, I said, well, what about your FTMs? Like, how's that? How does that work?
We're just their delusional sisters. There's this kind of weird thing where it's like, and because so little is understood, and because everybody is moving in their own circles of confirmation bias, where they're discussing this issue, deciding on facts that are absolute, like they decide these are the facts within their little confirmation bias because it makes sense to them. They don't know what information they're missing. Trans guys take testosterone, so it's really not, and lesbians are also kind of a little bit more domestically violent than your average, heterosexual person, from what I understand, heterosexual woman, from what I understand. So, like, it's not unusual for trans guys to be a bit violent from time to time, like while they're coming on. Like, there have been guys that are, yeah, let's not go there. But like, it's not like they're safe little, non-threatening. Like, there's a bit of a, they're just our deluded sisters, and they want to come. There's there's a little bit of confirmation bias about that, and sex drive kind of goes off like it's only been, I've been on T 23 years at this point, and it's only been in the last couple of years that it's actually started to die down. I've had it under control for a number of years, obviously, but like, it's been pretty, full on for a long time. So the idea that trans guys are, meek and mild and well behaved and, blah 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 blah, and it's like, yeah, they may be around you socially because they want you to like them and they're behaving, but what happens behind closed doors maybe a little bit different.
Yeah, I've been to a couple of trans DVs actually, and with different couples, and yeah, it was really violent. And I know the only reason the person didn't turn on me is because, like, I was bigger than them. Like, it was like, because I could see the aggression. I saw all the signs. I was like, this could go bad. I'm looking at this person and going, I'm going to tie you.
5'4".
I'm going to tie you in knots.
Yeah.
Going to happen. Like, you pull me on. And because it wasn't until afterwards, because like, I didn't know what it was, but I thought there's something going on here. Like, as soon as I went in, all my cop senses was like, no, there is something really odd going on here. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it. These people are acting weird. This is really incongruent. There's just so much going on. And that's when I found out later on, like, when the person calmed down, I said, I was going to tie you in knots. Like, when they're all calmed down in the watch house. You ever do that, like, to a cop again, like, you're going to get tied in knots. You're playing with the big boys now. This is kind of, and you appear to be male. Like,
yeah,
like I was going to twist your arms off your head.
Yeah.
Sorry,
you have a female arm, so maybe, there's a lot of, there are a lot of understandable assumptions around trans guys that, like, and if you don't really know the culture or you're only skirting around it, then it, it kind of makes sense. But once you wade in, it's like, it can be a lot different. Like,
yeah, I mean, that's humanity. We're human beings. I mean, there's nothing that we're not capable
of. This is actually something that I wanted to talk to you about, the spaces thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like, a lot of the debate comes back to toilets on Twitter, on social media.
Of course, yeah.
Pretty much it always comes back to toilets. And while I agree in principle that trans people have their spaces, gay men should have their spaces, lesbians should, like women should have their spaces, men should have their spaces. Like, I kind of agree in principle that should be the case. Like, in an ideal world, absolutely no questions asked. Like, I don't know that people have the right to it, but I think, that surely we can be civilized enough for that to be the case. Pardon me. But I kind of wonder, and I don't really know a lot about this subject, but it seems to me that the reason that the walls surrounding single-sex spaces have been broken down is, like, the legal mechanism of discrimination has been used to break those walls down.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
So, like, I believe if you want to have a single-sexed operation you can apply for an exemption for some like if it is for the common good, or like there's a good, like if you have a good reason as to why your domestic violence shelter should be single service, or whatever it is, then exemptions are granted.
Yes.
But the idea of like single sex spaces per se have been attacked over generations using anti-discrimination rhetoric. So
There's an inconsistency there, isn't there?
Yeah, like while I agree that like I think the women should absolutely have the right to, like, if self-ID guy comes in, they should have the legal right to be like, hey, what are you doing? Get the fuck out. Like, and kind of gang up on people that stick out and that are causing trouble. I think they should absolutely have the right to do that. Like I'm not sure. I don't know how you would go about that. Like there's an inconsistency there, considering that feminism, different arms of feminism have kind of led the charge, breaking, like using that, anti-discrimination stuff to break down the boundaries of
exactly men's club. And that's what it was about. So, of course it was these elite men's clubs down in, the big cities, Sydney and Melbourne, where you get rich businessmen and stuff like that go in, and they would, surely they'd be doing deals and brokering stuff down there. And so, I would imagine that mainly they're just social clubs where just guys, get to go and hang out and bitch about their wives.
Yeah.
But look, of course, that's where some of the stuff was happening. And women were like, no, we want access to that. And you can't deny us from that. But then to kind of like, and this is, oh God, forgive me for saying this, but this is one thing where I agree with everything you just said, but I got to say there is a degree of schadenfreude that I feel with this. It's like, well, girls, so you didn't want us to have our little working men's clubs, did you?
Yeah.
You didn't want us to have even the elite clubs were down there. And I couldn't have got into those elite clubs. Like Matthew Maloney, cop, was never going to join the Melbourne club. It's not going to happen. That's not like, oh, that's a man thing. You could go in there and say, no, I couldn't. I couldn't afford the thousands and thousands and thousands of bucks. No one was ever going to put some like far north Queensland redneck cop forward to be a member of the Melbourne club. What kind of crap? This idea that somehow I had access to that space because that I'm a man, bullshit. There are a lot of other things that are going on there. And again, like I get why you wanted access to it. You're like, well, okay, sure, scum Maloney, you're not going to reach that. But hey, I actually am in the socio-economic class, and I am being denied, though I'm being denied access to this deal making and to everything else. It's like, yes, that's unfair. Yes. But it's like now, it's like, so now you girls want your little spaces, do you? You want the no boys club?
I kind of did this tweet yesterday, I think it was, because as soon as you kind of start talking about this, as soon as you kind of they do this thing where it's like, okay, well, you're trying to blame the victim here, and you're trying to throw the blame back on women who are fighting the good fight, and and it's not the aha that you think that it is, and it's like, no, it's not that I'm trying to snooker you. It's that this is a complex situation, and there are multiple factors, and feminism kind of fucked this up just a little bit. Like, however great the intentions may have been, and I absolutely believe that the intentions that these women had to kind of, they couldn't have been better intentions, but they kind of continuously seem to have historically cut like corners, or perhaps a better way to explain that would be, they engaged in some, ends justify this means short-term thinking, that is now coming back around and biting them on the ass. And I don't think that we can resolve many of these issues without a little bit of ownership over that. And they kind of, this tweet that I did yesterday was, like they kind of do this thing where it's like the facts don't care about your feelings, and they kind of go out of the way to call people like me she and her, and like friends of mine that are completely passing trans women as he and him. And if they can find out our birth names, they will absolutely use them, just as point of pronouns are rohypnol kind of thing. And it's like facts don't care about your feelings in one direction, and it's like, well, I'm afraid that's also a two-way street. Like, I'm not saying it's all your fault. You created this situation. Tough shit for you. Sucks to be you. I'm out of here. Bye-bye. Suck it up. It's like, no. Like, if we want to fix this situation and you expect us to be honest, you also kind of have to be a bit honest. And, the truth doesn't really care about your feelings either. And feminism is kind of like there are different arms of feminism.
Yeah,
that is
that's
kind of
nasty. That's just let's come out and say it. Like I worked in the I can say this now because I'm out of the police. I worked in the domestic violence high risk team, and there were some excellent women there. But there was some, and some people who were well intentioned, but there were some nasty, misanthropic harpies, and who were just they were motivated by resentment, bitterness, and hate. And like I don't even, as much as that scared me and it was just wrong, you could see why that would happen, because like you talk to these women later and you'd find out that there's a reason. Like they had been betrayed by some male in their life, or all the males in their lives. Like their dad was a shit. Their uncle tried to shag them. Their boyfriends were turds. Like it's like I can kind of understand why that would happen. It doesn't justify it, but you can go, well,
yeah.
I see what
I mean, in some ways, it's probably as good a reason for any as to why they are not suitable for that level of work. Like if you come in with that level of ideological hatred, then you're not going to see the grand picture. Like women are absolutely violent, not in the same way as men in terms of physical. They engage in toxic, reputation destruction, spreading just absolute outright bald face lies about even about other women. Like, like, I don't like you. I don't want you to have a platform. I'm going to get my girl gang to bang, to separate you from the crowd, because I'm going to engage in a whispering campaign about you, and you stealing our work, or you taking credit for our work, or whatever it is. We're going to, basically just keep you at arm's length and destroy your character socially so that you can't operate in this space, in this country. Like, you're done.
This idea that women can't be bitches. It's just women can't lie.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I explained to them too, because it's like, this is one of the other things, because it was run by another government department, multi-agency thing. So the police weren't running it. Because we're and mate, you get like the manager go, okay, police, we need this guy arrested for this, this, and this. And I go, and I don't know how many times I explained this. Like the first time you understand, it's like, let me explain the way that law enforcement works. Okay. The whole idea of due process does work around the idea that we need to prove something beyond reasonable doubt. So there needs to be evidence. The person needs to give us a statement. It's like, well, no, we've heard this in counseling. I'm telling you now, you can use that as evidence. No, I can't use it as evidence. The person needs to come down and make an oath acted statement, and they need to be willing to swear, put their hands on a Bible or whatever it is, or on Dawkins's, and swear that that's the truth, the sole truth, nothing but the truth. So help me, Richard. Like right in front, in the court. Yeah. Well, they're not willing to do that. They're risking themselves. You don't understand the dynamics. You're not trauma informed. Blah 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 blah. No, I understand all of that. And it's like, well, why don't you just believe women? And it's like, well, the whole thing, the entire justice system works on the idea that people lie. That's what due process is about. It works on the axiom that everybody is lying, and that they're going to use a highly coercive, punitive system to punish people because they don't like them. And we need to find out that the reason this person is being held accountable is not because you don't like them, but because they committed this act. which is a breach of the peace, actually. Because, you know, really the ultimate, and this is something I love about our legal system, it's the crown. You know, the Americans have the people versus, so it's like an abstraction. It's not like Kev versus Matt. The person who is actually the victim of every crime in the state is His Majesty, previously hers, obviously. But it's like, well, you're breaching my peace. And you think that's a fantastic dynamic to have. You really don't want it like this person versus that person. You don't want that. That's a really unhealthy, bad dynamic. And I don't know how many times I had to explain that to people. And they would just go, just go and get him arrested, okay? Just make sure it happens. It's like, yeah, no.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you think of what that's undermining, Kev. That's undermining, it's not undermining democracy, that would be, but that's undermining our entire, that's undermining 500 years of British common law.
Well, it kind of is, like, is it it kind of is undermining democracy though, isn't it? Because it is a whole heap of,
Yeah,
you know, like the Labour lefty
right.
kind of greeny, like we need to protect women and we need like the idea that the world should be a safe place and that you can just, you know, like walk down the street completely and, you know, like it's a lovely idea and I wish that was the case, but it really isn't. There are sociopaths and psychopaths out there, and you know, like you kind of need to protect yourself and be aware and realize that, you know, don't go walking down dark alleys if you don't, you know, like I wouldn't go walking down dark alleys like in this guise because I'm likely to be bashed. Like previously, I was probably likely to be bashed and raped. Like
now just bashed. Oh, that's a great leap
well,
forward,
I'm not
Kev.
be like,
There's
oh,
progress. A great leap
you know,
forward.
like you know, like, and that's not a good thing. Like that's not something that I like. But you like if you start it's like that guy, that the trans guy that was like, oh, we should lock people up for, you know, making threatening statements against trans people online. It's like you like, do you not see where that leads? Like you can't, like,
yeah, again, it's the safe spaces thing. It's like, oh, you want to knock down those boundaries, do you? Okay. Well, you know, welcome to.
There are consequences. Like you are better off to you know, kind of, let's not do that.
And the greatest killer, like the stats are clear. Look, the biggest murderers of children are women. What?
It's completely like.
It's like so it's all about protection, isn't it? Is that really? So
yeah, you show people those stats and they can't even compute. Like
no, and like, you know, oh, anyway.
Yeah. Is that a knock on your door?
Oh, but that's my wife in the kitchen.
Oh, chopping.
Yeah, yeah. I think so. That's
Yeah, I don't know. Like, how would you feel about this book? Like, would you ban it? Did you not see that video?
Look,
It's pretty bad. I had people actually say to me online, because I shared that video around and I was like, this is outrageous. Like 8 to 11 years old. Like 8 years old is 4th grade. 11 years old is 6th grade, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've kind of been zoning in on that at the moment, trying to remember, because it's kind of just an abstract idea. How old, like what developmental stage an 8-year-old is at, or, you know, like even up to 15, 16, 18, like when you're in your mid to late 40s and you have no kids, or you know, like you're in your mid 30s and you have no kids and you've got a couple of pets as kids. Like it's a really abstract idea, like what kids are actually like, you know, 6-year-olds that believe in Santa Claus, you know, like,
of course Santa Claus exists. How dare you suggest otherwise?
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like it can be a really abstract idea. So I've kind of been trying to think about, okay, so what does an 11-year-old look like internally? Like what is their internal, what do they believe? What are they capable of? Because I frankly have no idea what an 11-year-old is cognitively capable of understanding. Like I just don't know. And some of this stuff is pretty advanced. So I was kind of sharing it around going, you know, like this could very easily firstly be used as a tool to groom kids in terms of,
Oh, that's what it is.
It's a book.
It's no, it is. It's a grooming tool. So I mean, so to answer the question directly, would I ban it? No. But would I make it? Would I get a more accurate categorization and recognition of what it is? That's grooming.
Yeah.
And anyone who says no, it's just education. No, that's grooming. You know, I used to be a sex abuse investigator. I know grooming when I see it. That's grooming. So are the book reading down at the library with guys dressed up in checks and getting people to shove money in. That's grooming. No. But again, like I wouldn't ban the book, but I'd get a more accurate. It's like, okay, well, this is rated R, or this is PG, or whatever. Because you think of the movie rating scale. So I'd kind of like get at that, because that's a misrepresentation for them to say, oh, this is an educational tool for eight-year-olds. It's like, okay, well, if people want sex education, or that's fine, but like let's get a classification scale on it, so we recognize what it actually is. And that's the tool that I'd use for that. And the same with even with the drag show stuff. Like I don't think it should be civic libraries, because obviously, again, you're getting governments going, we don't care what our ratepayers and everything else think. You're going to accept this, and you're going to. It's like,
that's the way.
But if someone private, like if some group wanted to set up a drag queen reading hour and people wanted to take their kids down to it, and it's not sponsored by me, like it's not a municipal library, it's not my money going to it, and you're stupid enough to take your children down there and sacrifice them to Moloch, the demon of, but like, fine, whatever. Let that be upon.
I'm kind of a bit torn about that, because having been around as that was organically kind of happening, you kind of can see, and I have friends that are lesbian couples that had kids by donor babies. They weren't I'm pretty sure they weren't IVF, but donor babies. So like you've got these kids that aren't really part of the heterosexual world, that are part of the gay world, but in the mid to late 90s and the early noughties, you kind of started having, like, especially on Fair Day, and like Mardi Gras is kind of like a month-long celebration, and I think Fair Day either opens it or closes it. No, Fair Day is the last thing that happens before the parade. So it's like Fair Day happens, and then the next week the parade happens, and the whole thing is over until next year. And it's a few 100,000 people that descend on Victoria Park, which is basically right next door to Sydney Uni. And it, like, in my early 20s and into my 30s, it was my favorite day of the whole year. We'd get absolutely baked and then go and sit in the park and have fun with our friends for the whole day. And it was kind of like this old school fete kind of thing, but massive. And there was more and more and more and more and more people like lesbian couples and some gay couples showing up with their blankets, and these little kids, they just started popping up, little kids that they were raising. And it's like, there's really there's nothing that's suitable for these kids.
It's not family friendly. It's not for that. Again, I don't want to go into that, because I know, and there's going to be, because there's some lesbian couples that I know that watch my show who've got kids, and I don't want to have an opinion on that. But like, I went to.
I'm starting to kind of change my mind about a whole heap of stuff. Like, is a gay, like, is it innate? Like, I'm starting to question that a little bit. But like, so I kind of can comprehend if it is a drag, like if it is your gay uncle, your mum's best friend dressed up in drag, like that's kind of still where my brain is at, even though I've seen for the last 2 years that is no longer the case.
Yeah.
And that it is some random creepy stranger in a monkey suit with, you don't even want to know what dangling. Like,
it's sinister. I just don't understand.
Really is.
And I had a high-ranking member of the Department of Education because I just did a secondment, not a secondment, a contract there. A really high-ranking member in executive level come down and discuss it, because the Department of Education is really left wing, and they just assume that everyone is woke. Like if you're in the Department of Education, you're woke. So they just immediately, oh, hi, comrade, was down there in my cubicle. It was like, and the political, and I swear to God, Kev, like I was careful, like I was the only conservative Catholic in the village, but I shut the hell up and just like I didn't, if someone asked, I'd tell, but like I wasn't advertising it. And it was early in the piece, so this executive came down and it was like they were just discussing education, and then the conversation led naturally into, it's like, and this person's gone, oh, and it's like these bigots who stand against, this, want to stop trans people and everything from coming into the schools and coming into the libraries, and it's like, these small-minded bigots. Like, there's nothing, like, we're trying to educate them, can't they see it? And like, and this person was, again, like, legitimately, and I'm kind of like looking at this person as like, I didn't hide my shock as well as I meant to. So, well, I mean, you're not one of them. And I went, yeah, yes, I am.
Yeah,
I think it's sinister. I think there's something wrong with it. I'm a former sex abuse investigator. And if you don't see the fact that like these, we don't even know whether or not they got blue cards, I bet you that's been waived. I bet you no one checks that. But even if they've got them, so what? If you don't see that as the sexualization of children and potential grooming, well, we're just going to have to agree to disagree. We have very different conceptual frameworks. Like you're seeing, we're both looking at the same thing, seeing very, very, very different things.
I've kind of been shocked by that, like, because I tweeted about the book a lot, and I got it to rip it apart for a dub, which I'm sure other people have done, as like other turfy organisations in Australia would have also done exactly the same thing that I did, and they basically shut it down, so it's now no longer available in stores. It's only available online, which is far from the win that, it's a win. We'll take it. I was tweeting about it, and there were at least 2 or maybe 3 mothers that their responses were, one of them, the first one was like, I wish I had had this book when I was being groomed by a monster. It would have taught me that I had the right to say no. And it's like, I'm sorry. I think you might be like, firstly, I'm really sorry that your childhood got stolen. Like, let's start there. Secondly, like, if you don't think that this is basically just a handbook, like it's basically telling 10-year-olds they should be interested in sex, and there's something wrong with them if they don't, they're absolutely probably, they're highly likely to internalize that on some level. They should be interested in this. And then secondly, it's also a device of, like for grooming. Is there anything that you're interested in the book? Is there anything that takes your fancy? Let's see what the book says. Like, it's absolutely a tool for grooming that monsters can absolutely use. Like, and a kid is like, a book is not going to enable, like, it's not a book is not going to equalize the disparity in power between a fully grown adult and a kid. Like, that the book, however good it is, it's not that good. Like, it's never going to be able to equalize that power imbalance. Like, I'm sorry, it's just not. And then she came, I thought, that's a slam dunk. There's no, like, she will have to at least concede that that's a reasonable point and that I'm possibly right. Like, if she's a reasonable person, she probably will see it my way. I was pretty happy with myself. I was big noting myself, high-fiving myself in my own mind. Not what happened at all. She came back again and was like, you're just, I can't.
How dare you, bad person, evil.
Basically a bigot. And then there was another mother, a mother that was like, my 12-year-old is basically going, like, they're talking about this stuff in school, like in the schoolyard. He's going to learn about it on Pornhub. I would prefer him to learn about it via this book than on Pornhub. And I was like,
you don't want to take responsibility for that as an adult, as the parent. You don't want to sit your kid down and have the birds and bees talk. You don't want to do that. Too awkward. You're going to leave it to Pornhub and a book.
I kind of was like, well, if you're too busy to parent your child, then I suppose the least worst option is probably preferable. And she was like, came back at me because that probably was a little bit too far. But I was just like genuinely shocked by these parents who are like they're really not like even in the curriculum, they're not hiding the fact that they have decided that they know how to raise your kids
Oh, no, I know.
1,000 times better than you ever could. That like it's in the
Absolutely.
literature.
Absolutely.
Like they're not hiding it at all. And you show these parents that this is exactly what's happening. And I mean,
some of them want it. Like
yeah.
because high amounts of you think of what school actually was invented for. School was not invented to educate people because again, it's an industrial revolution thing. There are all these kids that were wandering around the streets. People used to get them together. It started off with the churches. People used to get them together and do like Bible classes, basically. Then the state went, oh, okay, well, we can do that, but rather than Bible classes, let's teach them to be part of the industrial machinery. Let's teach them. You got to be able to sit down. You got to be able to concentrate. You got to be able to make things. You got to be able to, So it was like teaching them to be part of the machine, but it came about from child mining. Like that's all it was about. And you can again perfectly read. Both parents are off working. Things changed so much in the Industrial Revolution. We forget just how much of a change that was. And even today, you read the newspapers or anything. And when I was at the Department of Education, you get all these parents. It's like, you're going to basically, I wanted all the responsibility is going to go on to you. You got to do it. So even if you've only got 10%, I'm making that figure up. I'm not saying that that's what it is. Say you've got 10% of parents doing that. Like, they're going to respond to that and educate, and you're going to get elected representatives going, yeah, okay, we've got to put more into that. And then you get like the unions who have got like the teachers unions who want to openly say, we want to indoctrinate these kids against capitalism, against Judeo-Christianity. We want to remake society and we're going to do it through this. So you got all these other agendas going on, but like they get the social license from people who fail to take responsibility. And then you get the other ones who are well-intentioned. They don't want to stand up against it. It's like, well, I'm kind of, but maybe if someone will say something, and you just get all of these dynamics, moving into that it's honestly, if you want to leave educating your kids, you want to give the responsibility to the state. That's what's going to happen. It's kind of like it's your fault. Like you're the one that's making this happen. You're the one voting for this. You're the one not standing up and saying no. And going back, and if you look at, there was this demon called Moloch, who used to demand child sacrifice. Now, this was it's not in Moloch is mentioned in the Bible, but like when you read all the kind of like stories around, that's not canonical. You got to understand these parents were happily sacrificing their kids to this demon, thinking that they were doing the right thing by the kids, doing to the higher power and for society. So this idea that parents like, and again, those people believe the things that they did. You don't think that people aren't going to sacrifice their kids to trans ideology? It's a principality. Of course they're going to do that. It's going to happen. And you're going to get surprisingly high numbers of people who will happily sacrifice. And I mean this literally. Sacrifice their children. And because like I saw the neglect in the police. So it's not just, and neglect is separate from what I'm talking about, but I also saw people who were, actively sacrificing their kids to, like, they'd palm their kids out to get drugs. It's like, yeah, have sex with my kids, give me drugs. Like, they're sacrificing their children, something like that. Don't think that this won't happen, and don't think that it won't happen like on a surprisingly high level. Like I'm talking 5% of the population, 10% of the population will do that. Like, these demons are coming back. These principalities are real. Well, and that's the Catholic in me talking. The beautiful, and when I say that, I know that shocks people, but to put that, for the secular people who are still with us, when I talk about principalities and demons and stuff like that, now that we have artificial intelligence, all right, you can't deny that there is intelligence that's separated from human beings outside of a body that acts on human beings. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about a principality. So, Moloch may or may not exist as a real demonic form, but if you don't think that there is an intelligence, because, you know, this trans ideology is effectively an intelligence, like it has values, it acts a certain way in the world. If you don't think that this ideology as a principality, as a demonic force, isn't acting on you and your children, you're delusional. And the beautiful thing is now, like, I can use this religious language that, you know, 5 years ago, like not even 5-10 years ago, me as a, you know, I wouldn't have understood. I would be shaking my head as like, what is that weirdo talking about? Principalities, demons. Like,
I think Jordan Peterson kind of doing the whole, because I've kind of like, yeah, I've kind of, I started before Jordan Peterson, before I found the Bible stuff, I was kind of like actually, because I was very into the Buddhist stuff where it's like basically you're meditating and sitting with yourself. So if you do that long enough, eventually your own shit starts to bubble to the surface and you start to become aware of it. And then, you know, you have to deal with it. And I kind of started to realize, because my mother is really, really Christian. Like, let me say that again, very Christian. And because I went through Bible, I was at Bible school when I was like 17. So we will have conversations. We agree to disagree for the most part, but we will have intellectual conversations. And it kind of started to dawn on me probably about 5 years ago that actually, if you get rid of the church stuff, that Christianity is basically it's a different mechanism, but it serves a very similar. There's an overlapping theme where it's like you are basically submitting your ego to a larger power. The story is kind of like there's lots of the same things that just kept flowing back, and it kind of started to dawn on me that while it's not the same thing, it kind of does, like it kind of serves similar purposes.
It functions in the same way.
You know what I mean? Like it kind of does.
It functions in the same way. Yeah.
And then Jordan Peterson started, like he's clearly converted to Christianity, whether he believes in God or not. I think he does, which is a new thing for him. I think his wife had a near-death experience with cancer or something, and that has changed their internal dynamic. And he's coming on hard with the Christian stuff now, very obviously. There's no doubt about it. But he also has been interested in group psychology for his entire adult life, and he's deeply educated on the subject. So he's, pardon me, and his whole maps of meaning stuff where he's talking about, you know, making meaning and old stories and fairy tales and things like that, serving really important purposes throughout human history and for, you know, morality and ethics and blah 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 blah. Him now coming into the Bible stuff and using his psychological, societal, cultural kind of education to kind of shine a light on, no, it's not just some, you know, sky god with a long beard.
Yeah, that's,
you know,
Zeus.
May or may not exist. You know, like it's not, you're not wishing and hoping. There are practical, having faith in something is, you know, like you have faith in something whether you realize it or not. You can be intentional or you can not be intentional. Like him,
and that's why, like initially, like when all the new atheist stuff started coming out, like, and I got a lot of new atheist friends, and I said, well, it kind of looks like a religion what you're doing. And they go, well, saying that atheism is like religion is like saying baldness is a form of, is like a kind of hair color. And they're right. It's like, no, we are saying, we're postulating that there is no God. You're not taking us on what we're saying. Like, please accept what we're saying. And I do. But Peterson and you have nailed it. It's like the fact that you don't postulate a God doesn't mean that you're not going to react in a religious pattern. In the same way that the Buddhist pattern, although it's, you know, it means and plays out in very different ways than Christianity, it's still a religious pattern. It's a pattern of worship. It's a pattern of postulating something and prostrating yourself before it and aiming for it. So it does. So it has its saints. Buddhism has saints. It has its idea of like good karma. it has its sins. It has all the, and so incidentally, there's atheism plus, which is the kind of like where new atheism is going. It's so funny because they've got these forums, and they're actually running in Cairns here for a little while too. And they used to try and get like old churches and stuff like that. So you get all these atheists together, and they basically have a mass. They'd have a mass. So they'd have a reading, and then they'd discuss it, and then they'd sing some songs. They'd do all this stuff. It's like, dude,
what songs do atheists sing?
yeah, well, I mean, God knows,
Yeah.
but it's like, they kind of like, they get together and they get to the International, maybe, I don't know, but like, you'd see it online, and they're doing this. I was like, dude, that's a mass. Like, if you think that that's not a religious pattern of behavior, like, just because you're saying I don't believe in God does not mean that it's not a religious pattern of behavior. Again, I'm accepting your axiom, and as best as I can, in discussing things on the way that you're saying, this is what you believe and this is what you hold. I get it. But like, if you don't see that that's not a religious pattern, you're blind. Like, you're not the rational person that you think that you are. The gap between your self-image and the reality, like, you're living a lie. It's just like,
you're lying to yourself and to everybody else around you as well.
Exactly.
Like a lot of the woke stuff has, it's not as comprehensive as like a traditional religious, like kind of body. But in a lot of ways, a lot of this woke leftist stuff, communist stuff, it all really fulfills the same, like it's trying to explain why we're here, what we're for, yada, yada, yada. Feminism does the same thing in a lot of ways. Like it kind of is a religious belief. Like, it's very ideological, and people that people that want to believe it don't necessarily see that that's what they're doing. But
for me, it clicked when I watched Black Lives Matter here. So you get these people, like, so they got together in a march, and they said, well, it was just a march. They walked along, they marched for a little while, then they chanted, then they stopped, then they kneeled, then they got up, then they chanted, and they marched. And as a Catholic, I'm sitting there going, yeah, I've seen that behavior before. Like, that's a ritual. And again, it has all the elements of mass. It's going to mass. Basically, those people were going to a woke mass. They all got together. They were communing together. They were motivated by a spirit. They're all excited by each other's company. They're all like, oh, yeah, we're aiming towards this higher goal. They engaged in rituals. They chanted. They marched. They did all of these things. And yet they mock me. It's like, come on, guys.
Yeah, and you see them, like, you see at the trans rights places where they go and they, like, TERFs will get, like, women will get together and hold a let's women. Well, actually, Auckland was awesome for this. Melbourne kind of was, but they didn't. They held the protesters back a bit further, so it wasn't quite as obvious. But like the people that, like, the trans rights activists that that protest, that were there to counter protest, kind of have these, like, they kind of almost have these religious kind of, like, heightened kind of out of body kind of experiences where they
speaking in
like
tongues,
the most outright, like, they manifest the most outrageous behavior because they are with their gang and feeling empowered, and they get a little bit high on the power of, like,
the spirit is like those Pentecostal. Like, I'm not a Catholic. I'm a Catholic. I've only ever been to a couple of the Pentecostal things where they go along and, like, the pastor will come up and hit someone on the head and they'll fall on the ground and start twitching and stuff like that. What the fuck? Like, it's like, I don't know where that comes from. Like, but like, that's what it reminded me of. Like, when you see that kind of stuff. And again, like, no disrespect to my Pentecostal cousins, but yeah, there it is. It's like the spirit is in you. Like, and it's like, yeah, and the trance, it's the same thing. It's the same pattern. Like, I've seen this before.
Yeah, there's one. There was one, like, self-ID, well, dude that had a walker and had long blonde hair, and he had a walker, and he was, like, charging at, like, basically from here to, maybe 2 or 3 meters away. This woman that was quite a bit smaller. She wasn't tiny, but she was quite a bit smaller than him. And he was like charging her with his walking frame, and he was like, witch, witch, witch. And the look on his face was like,
Demonic.
he was barely aware of what he was doing. Like,
Demonic.
just
Yeah.
like, totally off his head.
People get possessed. Like it goes back to this idea before. Like I'm not suggesting that there's definitely, but like if you allow an idea to possess you, it takes over you, and you've lost your personality. It's possessed you. Like you've invited it in. It takes control of your body. It pays out like a medieval possession. That's why they're doing that. And again, like to put it, this is one thing I love about these times, because we're starting to understand that there really are these external intelligences that work on people. And the way I explain it to people is like talking before about Santa Claus. It's like, of course Santa Claus exists. I mean, and I say that to my atheist friends, and they go, yeah, well, you do believe in, Sky God. I say, well, that's Zeus. But like, all right, I'm not saying that, Fred Smith down at the shopping center who put on a thing is a person that I'm not saying that there is a person dressed in red that flies around in a sleigh pulled by reindeers that delivers presents to everybody. I don't think that that's true. But that's not the same thing as saying that Santa Claus doesn't exist, because come Christmas time, whether or not you can see a manifestation of Santa. Again, that's not the entity that flies around. That's a different thing. But the spirit of Santa Claus can act on you. It's like ho ho ho, ringing the bells and giving out presents and stuff like that. You are being influenced by an external idea, an intelligence that existed before you were born and will exist after you die, that is influencing your behavior.
So in some real way, Santa Claus
in a real way
exists.
And you can be possessed by the spirit of Santa in a positive way. So like if someone was like really, so you got one of those, the shopping center Santa Clauses that was really getting into character, man, like method acting. And it's like, dude, well, that person could totally allow themselves to be possessed by the spirit of Santa and become the very incarnation.
I know a whole heap of single mothers on the pensions that allow themselves to kind of allow themselves to become influenced by the spirit of Santa in a really negative way come Christmas, because they spend way more money than they actually have on giving their kids everything that they never had at Christmas time. It's like, you're going to be in debt for the next 6 months. You're going to pull yourself out of the hole just in time for next Christmas. Like,
exactly. That's a possession. So there's an intelligence, a principality that exists. People get it.
Yeah.
It's 2023 and we're back in medieval times. So we can talk about demons. We can talk about angels. We can talk about principalities. So when you're in the Bible, like I remember as a kid, I'd be sitting there reading the Bible. And again, even up to, recently, it was 5-10 years ago, it's principality. I don't even know what that means. Like I just skipped over that bit. So well, I get it now.
Yeah.
We're back in medieval times, bro.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting watching like the lefty stuff, like, JP says, like he keeps asking, when does the left go too far to all of these left people, and they can't answer him. But we can it's kind of weird, because it's the, like, conservative values you can't really articulate. They're quite difficult to articulate. Just keep things the same. They kind of work. There's a reason for it. It's worked for a long time. Let's just keep them the same. Like, even though it's not perfect, like, let's just keep them the same. You can't really articulate them. When the left goes too far, and it's absolutely going too far at the moment, it can be quite hard to articulate exactly why that's the case, but you can see it. Like, there's a level of revulsion that comes over you as you're seeing people behave in this absolutely abhorrently, self-indulgent way. But and they're claiming that they're acting, they want to save the world, like all of these people that are stopping traffic, or like in the UK, I think it is, for the planet. Like, they're being completely self-indulgent.
And it's just about them. It's pride. It's all this other stuff. It's genuinely amusing to watch. But yeah,
Funny
right,
when the
bro.
motorists get out and start kicking them around. That's kind of amusing.
Yeah, well, it's mate, we've been going for 3 hours now, so I think we
Yeah.
might have to wrap it up now. As much as I'm enjoying this, I'll get you
Yeah.
to stay on, but we'll I'll stop the recording here.